This is the thing that bothers me about conservatives as well. I think somebody else brought this on this panel. Conservatives will say shit like, oh, these conversations should happen in the home. Yeah, they should, but they don't. So it has to happen at school, or else it's only going to happen on the internet and porn forums, or amongst their friends, or with their doctor when their girlfriend is 6 months pregnant. They're trying to figure out why their belly's so big and she's missing her periods. That's the only time these conversations happen, because conservative parents don't talk to their children about these things. Because for some reason, when conservatives turn 30 years old, they forgot every fucking thing about being a kid. And I don't know, because your conservative parents, they were fucking when they were teens, because half these conservative parents have children when they're in their fucking teens. And somehow they think that they're a sweet little child at 16 who's going to spend the night at their boyfriend's house playing Super Smash Brothers all night? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I don't know what it is, but when conservatives turn 30, they forget everything about being a child, and they won't have any of these conversations in the home with their children. So it seems like it's kind of necessary to make them happen in other environments, like at school.
Yeah, but
wait, Jesus. No, I want to phrase to more perfect union.
Talk to as the Jesus.
Red Pill has had his hand.
More perfect union. Go ahead. More perfect union.
No, fuck this shit, man. I got
more perfect union.
Super short.
I got directly fucking addressed there, right? You know what? Fuck this. Go ahead, geek. Go ahead.
Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. Place your bets.
With that being said, let's jump into the main topic. The one that everyone is waiting. The one that, like, no one can get enough of, apparently.
Apparently.
The C-word discourse. Give me a sec, sorry. So yeah, the C-word discourse. But we're going to put a little twist to that, which is that instead of talking about, like, everything that has been talked about already, basically, like, the focus on social media, like Twitch TOS, how is it apply and everything. Do you think that it's clear? Like, should the guidelines be changed? Do you think that it's fair and everything? And just as a reminder, so we don't get this kind of shit, please refer to it as the C word. I know you can have your opinion on this and everything, but please, for the sake of the show and everyone's safety, yeah. So we're going to start with KayBuckOph.
So I've talked about this numerous times. I think everyone on Twitch has talked about it till they're blue in the face. I think there's a lot of controversy on if you can be racist towards a white person. I think there's a lot of controversy on if this word even holds any meaning behind it, and if people should be upset by it. And at this point, nobody can tell anyone how to be affected by a word. We literally just talked about a tier list that people are getting upset about to the point that they're blocking people and crying about it. So using a word that may have some type of derogatory meaning behind it, like, you can't tell somebody they can't be upset by it. I'm at a point of just like, hey, if you don't have anything nice to say, like, just don't say it at all. Like, I feel like that needs to be repeated over and over and over to everyone in this world, because for some reason we decide we want to be a bunch of assholes all the time and just tear apart people for things that, like, make no sense and things they can't change. And I think Twitch should do a better job at creating guidelines and actually, like, enforcing them on any derogatory words. Like, I don't care what you're trying to say against somebody. If you're trying to be derogatory in any way, shape, or form and making up random words to call somebody a derogatory word and just using something else in replace of it is still being derogatory and being an asshole. So, like, you should get in trouble for that. So there's millions of words that come up on a daily basis that people are using different ones, and there's no reason that we should be in a world like that. We shouldn't be just bullying people off of stupid shit. Like, I understand, like, bullying does help you in the long run of growing as a person, but at this point, we're all how old now? Like, grow the fuck up and stop being children. We're not in high school bullying kids anymore.
And I'm muted, of course. I'm going to throw it to Joe Lewis.
I think the terms of service is very clear about hateful language, including slurs. I think the problem is they seem to not have the tools needed to assess slurs and offensive language. And Twitch should probably expand that, whether that be with, like, more individuals within the community moderating content, or just a better, like, response mechanisms. It tends to go towards automation, which I don't really agree with. But by and large, the language within terms of service is pretty clear about it. But it seems like there's an issue with the enforcement around that. And that's something I think Twitch should probably explore. And yeah, like, you can be racist towards white people. Like, we gotta stop that capping.
All right. I'm going to try to get active here.
So I was actually at work when I heard about this lovely discourse. I was very surprised to find out that Hasan and Vaush had both been banned for it. I was just like, what the fuck? I'd heard of the C word being used before as a slur, but I kind of thought initially that it was in reference to like food, as in like, you know how people say, oh, white people make bland food, and obviously C words are quite bland. Crunchy snacks are quite bland. But I don't know, I think it's absolutely ridiculous to compare it to any sort of racial insult. I don't think that it is at all. And it actually initially came about from something that Shakespeare wrote about something called a bloviator. That was a word I actually just learned this week, and it means like a sort of pompous bragging person. So it wasn't even initially to do with whip C words, which is what people were saying. So that's what I think. I think it's silly.
All right. Dr. Red Pill.
Yeah, just real quick, Ginger Juice. Are you eating C words right now? Need an answer to that. Yes. Okay. I take offense to that. I'm just gonna say it. So
I'm just eating my words here.
Gotcha. I think it's really important to set a precedent that like racial prejudice probably shouldn't be tolerated. And like as inoffensive as it seems, like I don't take offense to it personally, but I do think in a time where it seems to be becoming more common on like social media, for example, to have people legitimately saying sort of hateful things against white people, I think we should probably cut that off and like try to keep an awareness of like how we should all respect each other's innate differences and not resort to name calling based on like immutable characteristics. Yeah, if we get any like other takes from that, we could like go into it. But like another part of me wants to like bring this to like that whole tendency to label people on social media and like resort to name calling and like all these. I mean, it's not just the C word. There's like a bunch of slurs. It's like, and frankly, they're a little bit funny, but like if it's motivated in any part by like actual animus by a significant portion of people, I think we should be real careful with that and like keep an eye on it and sort of discuss where that comes from possibly. That's my take on it.
All right. I'm going to throw to Paradigm.
When I heard that this topic was going to be the only topic, I held off on making my usual 2-hour video on the discourse and covering everybody's opinions because I wanted to save them for you guys. I feel like having a fresh mind and anyway, that's me. Personally, I personally don't care. Like, I care in the sense that Twitch TOS, as well as like the internet itself, has never really been a safe haven for minorities. Like, oh my God, I've already done this so many times on everybody's panels. Like, I hate making it about video games, but like, I survived the Modern Warfare 2 lobby. Like, there was no TOS. You was good or you was crying. Like, there was no, you was up for you were up for 12 hours or like you went to school and you was mad for the rest of the day. For us to use this as the example of where we're trying to find the line in the internet for private companies to say, this isn't allowed, it's going to make me say, well, then why was that ever allowed? I never got support for the hate raids. I never got support for the comments on the raids on my YouTube. If it takes this word and this discourse to start paying attention to that, then it plays into the exact power structure of the issue of why you should ever have taken offense to it in the first place. Because now it's affecting you. Therefore, now we care. Like, you're not helping me by taking, like, again, I'll say for the sake of argument, I agree with the bans. Like, for the sake of what Red Pill said also earlier, it's like, if you're using it with malicious intent and it's starting to catch on as that, let's rein that back. Especially for the people who consider themselves leftist, you can't have your cake and eat it too. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of people who aren't nuanced in conversation will attempt to binary this, and it's unfair to get mad at them for the binary because I feel like they're representing it more as like their only strike against the power structure. And even that strike is like a little tight, but when people say it to me or people say like certain words to me, there is no binary. It's like, you meant that. I will walk you back to how you got there. So if we're going to have the charge go, yes, this is wrong, and we should care about people's feelings, it's like, well, I really wish you cared about that in every other aspect, because once I leave Twitch, like, my life in danger from those same people that you want me to protect with language on the internet. Like, and the difference don't help you. Help me help you. That's what I would say in response to my opening statement on this topic.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Kate.
Well, okay. From a mom's perspective, and I do have 6 children, I think that hate words in general shouldn't be utilized because, they're hateful, they're rude, they're mean. But from a perspective of a constitutionalist, of a person who believes in freedom of speech, all right, if someone wants to say something hateful and disgusting and use words in a derogatory manner, you have a right to do that, but own up to it and the consequences that come along with it. So if I want to sit out here and, say racist slurs and dog on people, I'm going to have to own up to the fact that I might be breaking some policies. I may have to own up to the fact that I might be pissing some people off. I might have people threatening my family because of things that I say. And so you need to be an adult. You need to use your brain, be cautious about what you say, understanding of how it could be interpreted by somebody else. And, make your choices wisely. When it comes to TOS, specifically with Twitch, I think that they are hit or miss. Sometimes they will hit you with something and you're like, why are you saying, like, what did I do wrong here? And then other times you're like, why the fuck didn't they get that person shot down? Why is that person like able to spew their hate and disgustingness and just go, and yet you're gonna attack me? And so I think that if they're going to put these boundaries and these restrictions, that they do have to kind of across the board do the same thing. But honestly, in my opinion, you say what you want to say, but be prepared for the ramifications of what you say and what you do. Actions have consequences. Words have consequences as well. You might lose your entire channel. Who knows? Yes, that's all I really have to say about that.
All right. I'm going to throw it to CTV.
Well, I feel like this has been a long time coming. Long time coming. For far too long, there's been way too much complacency with allowing something that the minority communities that are always complaining about, right, which is an ism, right? But then thinking that it's okay to use the same isms that they would be against a majority population, right? So the fact of the matter is that paradigm shift isn't far off base. If it takes this simple discourse right here to get people looking in the inverse direction, so then maybe they can see how, like, while you are against this thing, there are people on your side that are engaging in this toxic behavior. Maybe you should be doing a little bit more self-awareness of the community that you're in, right? Especially when you've got quote-unquote leaders of these communities engaging in this kind of behavior. I think that Twitch did the absolute best thing that it could do, which was smack somebody's pee-pee for thinking that the rules don't apply to them. And quite frankly, especially in the case of Vaush, every time I've ever talked to this dude, I get accused of white supremacy. Every time I talk to Vaush, right? So I'm just like, I'm glad you got your pee-pee smacked, bro. You deserved it. You fucking deserved it, you know? I try not to be combative unless people become combative with me, and at the point where they do, depending on the level in which they engaged, my response will be measured against that. So, you know, I try not to start that off from the start, unless it's with somebody that I know and it's like, we know we're memeing, and then it's not a deal. You know what I mean? But if I don't know somebody, I'm less likely. I guess for me, the default is, you know, if I don't know you, you're not a friend from the start. Like, you got to prove, you know, like there has to be a building of the relationship. If I don't know you, you're a stranger, and you know, stranger danger, right? There's the meme, right? So there it is. So yeah, I'm glad that we're having the conversation. I feel like that it's not going to be one that we're going to find a lot of disagreement with, but it's going to be a way to be able to explore some nuance, maybe in some different ways, because I think this topic's already been kind of raining in the ground this last week, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, this is why the focus was more on Twitch TOS rather than see what Discourse and everything. And last but not least, gender Jews.
Yes, I am last, but definitely not least. So my whole stance upon this is like, well, we all understand that like with social media, terms of service is sort of needed because like terms of service is meant to foster a community where it's beneficial for both creators and viewers. And if a word, you know, that is, I guess, antagonizing or victimizing a person based on the color of the skin, yeah, that's obviously bad. I guess like my only problem with this is like, I guess from the left's perspective, it would be like some people are sort of don't really understand the grasp that racism can go both ways. Like there's systemic racism, which is usually what they're thinking of, like where a system itself has a hierarchy of one individual, but racism itself in a personal setting is a two-way street. Alternatively, from the right's perspective, they're using this as like a moment of cultural effervescence of just like, yo, we finally have a slur. We're oppressed to the same degree with the other slurs. And we all acknowledge that's definitely not the case. Like, yeah, the C word itself is a slur, but again, it's also used to refer to like this little snack that I've been eating all day, all right? I can't even say this, all right? This is sad. This is the true oppression. I'm kidding. But my main thing is, yeah, TOS should refer to like social norms. Like racism, pretty obviously bad. So it should be applied equally to everyone. That includes white people, because there are some people who are just don't like white people, and that's a whole other topic. But yeah.
Real quick, before we
Everybody said
launch,
everything.
Galactify, did I skip you? I forgot if you went.
No, I went. Don't worry.
All right, perfect. In that case, you can engage. The floor is yours. Sorry about that.
So let me make some concessions. Like obviously the C word is not nearly as bad as the N word or like various other slurs. What else? What else did there say? This has been like ran into the ground. Can I ask this? And this is like getting outside the narrow scope of TOS guidelines, but do you guys acknowledge that there is like a rising normalization of like slurring white people, or like sort of these little nicknames? So these lists that are coming out that people are having fun with, like Snow Hoach, or like there's all these funny things, like, and frankly I think it's kind of funny, but it's also like, I don't know.
Well, it's been there for a while. It sort of just surfaced up at this point. Like it's been like a whole sort of like subculture in and of its own. I mean, like, again, as a minority, I've had friends who are other minorities, and surprise, surprise, typically white people that actually you say these things. And personally, again, I'm just not a fan of it because it just makes me uncomfortable. Because if I'm gonna insult somebody, I'd rather insult something that is not something they can't change about themselves. Like, I would rather make fun of somebody for being completely clumsy or just consistently getting a single thing wrong, rather than, you know, a physical characteristic of themselves. Like, I wouldn't make fun of somebody for being black, white, short, and amputee, so on and so forth. And like, it's fair if I apply that to everybody. And I feel like that should go for everybody as well, because if you make a comfortable environment, that's, again, typically what terms of service is for. It's doing its job, and that's a good thing.
I just think they have to cover all the space, the like word. Like I feel like if they're going to ban one word, like they need to start banning other words, and they also need to start like actually enforcing these things, because they don't enforce any of it. Like they literally added a thing onto Twitch that says suspicious user in your chat is somebody who's been banned and made a new account to follow your chat. Like they tagged them as a suspicious user, but still allowed them in your chat. Like, are you that dumb? Like, you can ban them, but you're going to flag them. Like, how does that make any sense? Like, I already banned them for a reason. Like, what the hell? And so now we have this issue. Like, hey, we're going to ban this word. Well, how much is it actually going to be enforced? One. And is it going to be only in big name streamers who are producing lots of content and a lot of people are viewing them? Or is it going to be in smaller content creators as well? And is it going to be in chats as well? Like, are we going to start actually enforcing these things? Or is it just going to be, hey, we're going to throw this word out here and say you can't use it, and then people are still going to use it?
Well, they're probably going to have a system where they have, like, you can flag channels. So if you have, like, the more people you have, the more likely you are to be flagged, and they'll take a look at it, and then they'll probably assign someone to put context on it.
But it's just, there's a lot of words that, like, when the new words got listed, like, there's 3 words that I know can come to mind immediately that they were like, hey, we aren't going to use these in chat. Like, these are TOS words. People still talk about them. People still talk about spicy sites on here. Like, they still do all these things that we're technically not supposed to do as content creators. And our chat still continues to do it. Or those chats still can do it. And nothing happens to them. So, like, what's the difference now? Oh, we're just going to add a word to the list and now notify people of all that who didn't know about this topic. Hey, this word is now used in this way, and it's gotten a big rise right now. So, hey, now more people are using it. I don't know about y'all, but I've seen a lot more use of this word recently than I have ever before.
Oh yeah.
It's sort of like, because like the whole thing.
Sorry, I have a 1-month-old that needs to be fed, and TOS will not allow me to breastfeed on stream. So I'm going to let you guys go, but I'll try to join you guys for the last topic. I apologize, but mom life.
You got to do what you got to do.
Bird.
But I really appreciate you guys inviting me on, and hopefully here shortly it will be a little bit better and I can get the schedule around it so that she isn't screaming in the middle of the debate.
That's
absolutely I appreciate you guys so much, and thank you for having me.
You have a good one. Take care.
As I was saying, like, with the C word itself, the common phrase of it was typically used to describe these little snacks. Not, it was.
But there's also a lot of origins of the word. There's a lot of origins of the word. I've heard, I didn't know this, that there's actually a term, it's actually used in certain areas for light-skinned people, like if you were mixed. Also, if the form that I knew it from was a crack of a whip, back from slavery. There's other terms that it came from, and that's where it comes from. So you don't even know which actually, like, they're trying to use it for, and depending on who you are as a person and the way they're saying it.
I feel like an application where. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. The whole thing with whip C words is that it was actually initially to do with livestock keepers, not slave owners. So.
Well, from both sides, there was 2 different origins of it, but yeah.
Course. Yeah. So it wasn't even like initially a racial thing, which is why I think it's a bit silly.
I mean, we could always come up with new words.
Yeah, there's.
I mean, people always do.
Always.
Yeah, it's like, the idea itself, and like the disparaging mentality is kind of like the issue. I mean, it's really like you can replace a C word with whatever word you want to invent to take its place. But the fact that so many people, the fact that so many people backed Hasan is kind of like my biggest issue with it. And like they said, it's okay. And let me just make some concessions. This is what I meant to do at the beginning. Like, I think so many people think it's okay because there is like a privileged position in society for people who fit that term. And like, I don't think anyone really doubts that. Like, there are like a lot of privileges that come along with it. And look, I think, to be honest, and like real talk, the goal, I think, is to sort of like take that privileged group and like maybe equalize the playing field a little bit and like pull them down a little bit. And I don't even know if that's like the worst thing in the world. Like, I don't think you should treat everyone poorly to accomplish that. Like that as a motivation, I can see why it would happen. I can see like why so many people would want different standards for these groups, because there is kind of a privileged group in this case. I mean, maybe that's
But
something
like,
we need to talk about.
if somebody has positive privilege, it's, as you said, it's not a reason to like take them down a peg or anything like that. You shouldn't be like pulling them down to equalize them with you. You should be lifting everybody else up so everybody at least gets to be on an even playing field. And like with the C word itself, again, the word itself, origins differ, but the fact that like you can use literally white boy instead of the C word with the same like inflections to get the same point across, that the reason it does that isn't covered by TOS, because although the word itself isn't a derogatory term, it's used in a derogatory way, and there's nothing to stop like anything that has hostile intent in that language. But then you get into like a whole conversation of, well, how do you determine if the intent in a written text where you can't have tonal inflection becomes hostile intent, you know?
And it's hard on a grand scheme of like Twitch. Like, how many content creators are streaming at the same exact time? How many people are then watching the content creators and typing in chat? And then how many like comments of like this word are we going to flag and then have somebody go back through and watch it? It's just on the grand scheme of thing, it's very hard to like completely withhold. And I understand that to 100%, but it's still like, if you're going to try to push something, you got to at least try to put the full force effort into something and not just say we're going to ban these big name streamers because we have people in their chats at all time or whatever, like whatever reason they got flagged a million times. So they got notified and we immediately went and like watched it. But like, it's just, you can't specify it to a bigger population and not to the rest when it's all on a platform.
And I mean, with the
no, keep talking.
Oh, I was gonna say with Hasan, it's pretty obvious he used it in a derogatory way. But with Vaush, I'd have to say he just used a word and he didn't say it in a derogatory way to anyone except himself. If that is, I guess, the standard they're trying to set, where like absolutely no use of the word in any form of fashion referring to race isn't allowed, I feel like they could have done that in a public statement instead of like banning two creators and just making this a whole flagrant ordeal, you know? Like, if you're gonna change, or like, I guess make an example of how they're trying to apply TOS, they could, like, again, as a very large platform, they could have issued a statement so people wouldn't be like, oh shit, if we have to like quickly abide or we're all screwed. Because now we're all talking about like the C word itself previously when next to no one was. But again, there is a positive outcome of like, well, at least now we're discussing, all right, race is a two-way street. People can be racist both ways. And now it's like, it's giving us a chance to have a nuanced discussion, but at the same time, content creators are sort of, paranoid in case they might slip up. So I can't talk about this.
And again, everyone's making literally random words to replace it. Now, on one stream, we were referring to it as cookies when we were talking about it. Like, so now, like, anyone can literally go and say that in a chat and be referring to it in that manner, trying to replace the C word with that word and just using it. Like it doesn't make any sense. You're still saying it. You're still trying to portray this thing. And I understand we were using it so nobody slipped up and we were just trying to have a conversation about the topic. But it's still now, all right, now we just invented a word for somebody to use instead of the word that we're talking about. Like,
hey.
Real quick, sorry to cut. I will throw it back to you right after. I just wanted to say hello to Biggs and thank you for joining us. So yeah, if you want to give a quick intro and give your take on the topic.
Yeah, I'm Biggs. You can find me at Biggs8500 on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. As far as the C word discourse has gone, I think that obviously words have, consequences and things like that. But and these platforms have, perfectly legal ways to, decide what's good on their platforms. But I think the real crutch of this issue is actually taking the power away from all these derogatory words. I always of the mind, sticks and stones might break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I think if we can take this kind of like this power that these words have over people, that they're actually like harmful, I think that's the better way to attack this issue. And I think by like, I kind of like what I've heard so far by hopping in here is, which was Gender Juice had mentioned, was that these are making these things even more to light. Like we wouldn't even be talking about this C word if it wasn't for this issue, right? Like it would just be pretty much a non-issue. Nobody would really care. So the more we give these words power, the more they're going to influence people. And I think that that's just probably not the route we want to take.
All right. I want to throw it back to Paradigm.
So, I hate being that guy. Anybody remember PogChamp?
Yeah.
Remember PogChamp?
Don't be that guy then. Don't do it. Just don't do it, Paradigm. Don't do it, brother. Don't be that guy. Don't do it.
PogChamp disappeared for an event that happened, and everyone didn't want, or Twitch didn't want, that emote being spammed in the chat because it is a consistent reminder of the face and the person and what they did, and to allow that as a representation of their brand, etc., etc. Somebody just spoke about just replacing the word with another word, and we end up right back at the same spot. And the more you talk about replacing the word to get around this, you end up in the same spot. The more you keep doing this, the more the circle goes around and around and around. So we could just eliminate the power that these words have. But you can't eliminate why they exist in the first place. I feel like we're having this conversation and it skips over the nobody cared until it affected a group of people who felt like they wanted to be affected by the thing. But when people who were talking about the thing, existing about the thing, preaching about the thing, and getting 20 views was talking about this over and over again, it was a non-issue. But nobody can bring themselves to replace, like, and we're just going to use it for the example because it's the biggest example. Nobody can replace the N-word with another word and not have it skew all the way down to, oh, I see what you're trying to do there. It doesn't give you the same reaction. You want to equate the words, and we're having a conversation about two streamers, two big content creators who bring in a lot of revenue for their platforms, getting banned over a word which gave it its legitimacy. Once this discourse stops, we're still the target. You won't say this word anymore. You won't care. No one will throw a hissy fit over it unless they want to have that as a part of their identity. This word upsets me.
Question though. Do you think that there needs to be a blanket ban on the word in general as if it's Voldemort, or do you think that the word could be used in comedy?
That's a good question. I like that. Fuck with that question.
I would like to eat my snacks.
Yeah.
I think the way that probably comedians because I can think of a couple off the top of my head from some specials in 2002 to 2004. I think that in the right context, this will be something that I'm sure finally conservatives will have a joke about that will be funny.
Second joke about to be released.
Right, like
you have really
I've
you have
heard
a lot
a few-
higher expectations than I do.
I've heard a few jokes over the years that, when I heard them, there was the use of the word, and then it was like, wow, that's not actually a thing, but it could be a thing, and that's funny.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
There's
like it's like, because there was this one joke, and I'm definitely not going to be saying the word, but we're going to kind of make sound effects. Okay. But like, I got told a joke one time. They were like, what sound does a KKK chainsaw make? And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, initially, I'm just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right. And they make the sound is run, right? So I was like, you know what?
I disavow Justin Bieber.
That's a bad joke, but it is kind of funny because a chainsaw does make a sound like that. but it's like, you know, But you see what I'm saying, though, right?
And I'll drive the point home right with that.
Yeah.
You found it funny. How far back could you look for the reference that would give you the feeling? Because
what do you mean
once
look back for the? What do you mean look back for the thing?
So if somebody makes a joke, and okay, if Michael Richards somehow slips up again, Creamer for those people who don't know, if Michael Richards slips up again and says a word, it's like I could look back and see that even if you were, even if it was the clever, most slyest thing I've ever heard in my life, and all that would be, I'm gonna say out my mouth, it would be so much funnier if that came from a black man. That would hit different because the connotation being driven down into like social commentary becomes, well, why are you making that joke? What is your previous outlook on it that's making you think that's funny? A movie was made about this, Down to Earth, with Chris Rock. Like, he came into the comedy club thinking he was still black, but he had a white body on, and the jokes wasn't hitting, so he tailored it to come from a perspective that's different. When we're talking about different perspectives, I feel it's unfair for us to give this conversation so much validity because it's not affecting y'all to a degree where, like, we have an organization out that's hunting the people that we call this. But there have been organizations in history that hunt people that they call a certain word. So you care now because we're online and we're sharing this community in this beautiful place where we can all share our ideas and be loving and caring, and now your feelings are hurt? I'll give you the validity of having your feelings hurt. Like I said earlier, I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, you know, you're a white man or blah, blah, blah. You're privileged, you know, I get to say whatever I want. But I also will say you shouldn't also be upset about it because let's be honest. Let's really look in the mirror for a second. Is this bothering you to that degree where you feel like it's getting to a point where like we're starting churches hunting y'all? Because if if it is to you, then that's not happening.
I'll tell you, look, one of the funniest things that I think that's happened to me is I actually was a black guy that lives in North Florida, right? And you know, you'll say Florida man from the start, right? But he, you know, black guy wearing a fucking cowboy hat, looks like a country boy, right? I don't assume anything else other than he's a country boy. You know what I mean? He walks up to me, right? And you know, we were getting together for a little community dinner or whatever, and I was just kind of setting out plates and stuff, and and you know, just being nice to everybody because you know, fucking you're part of the community. I'm doing nice things, right? Anyway, he walks up and I hand him his plate. There, here you go, buddy. He goes, well, that's mighty wide of you. I was like, what?
It's funny. That's funny.
It's funny.
That's actually
right?
funny.
Black guy telling me that's mighty wide of me, right? I was like, what? Okay, you got me, bro. You know what I mean? So,
can I respond to Paradigm Shift? So I totally agree with you. Like, it doesn't have the same weight whatsoever, and we shouldn't treat it like it does have the same weight. Do you acknowledge that the precedent is important? And if we are to get to a point where we try to make things like that matter less, we need to have a precedent that is equal for everyone. And also, just let me say, I think, look, there was like a wave of banning of words. So you guys were talking about the early Xbox days when anything goes. You saw like a progression where they started to crack down on words more and more. I think like the N-word was one of the first words, and that's the one everyone, like I hate hearing it. I don't like hearing it. I think everyone in society, almost everyone, they hear it and they fucking cringe. And like that was the first word that we sort of put in this box that we take super seriously. And C-word is not as serious as that. It's definitely not as serious as that. But if we are to progress to a point where we are trying to treat everyone equally, and like the only alternative I see, like in the situation you laid out, is like we go to 10 or 20 or 30 years where we just like weight it in the other direction and slur white people the way things have been done in the past to try and even the score. Like, I think our only good option right now is to set that solid precedent and like maintain it and try to like everybody be chill with each other and not judge each other
Well, that's what I think we would
harshly.
do. Just do across the board. I don't give a fuck what you're saying, how you're saying it. If you're trying to be a dick to somebody, like, just stop saying it. Like, stop being a dick to everyone. And I like, especially about things that people can't change, especially their skin color, their race, ethnicity, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just stop being a dick to everyone. Like, grow the fuck up. Why are
Real
we
quick,
still
sorry.
using
I
these
will
words?
respond, but I
Real
feel
quick.
like we need to
Yeah.
introduce them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just wanted to cut to introduce More Perfect Union and Destiny. So yeah, More Perfect Union, give yourself a quick intro and your take on the topic, and same for Destiny after that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a More Perfect Union. I'm a constitutional conservative. I tried to be a sort of a live and let live kind of a person, and I have a keen interest in this from just in this particular topic because I think when I hear people on the left and even some people on the right look at this particular controversy and they say that, well, it's a question of degrees, right? And I think I'm sorry, I don't know the guy in the upper right, Red Pill. You were kind of saying like it's a degree, right? Like the N word's worse than the C word, right? But they're both, if they're both hurled as an invective, right, as a racial slur, it's racist. And to Buckoff's point, we need to just stop being dicks to each other and using words in pejorative ways that are meant to diminish or take, to dehumanize people. And it's not okay just because in your culture it's okay to say the N-word because it's a term of endearment or it's a badge of courage or honor. I don't agree with that, right? And one of the reasons why we sit back and we continue to have problems with the concept of racism is that we keep bringing race up every opportunity that we can instead of recognizing that Joe Louis, who I disagree with politically, okay, is a good sax player. And he's trying to help kids with education. And I can recognize him for those things, even though we disagree on politics. And I don't have to come across and denigrate him because he is not of the same race that I am. You lose that argument when you try to connect with human beings at a human level of understanding by trying to see or state in a coercive, acidic way things that they can't change about themselves and shouldn't be made to feel bad about themselves because they are of a race or a faith or something like that. We need to stop doing this kind of invective bullshit hurling.
Right. Destiny.
That was based. I agree with everything that guy just said.
Right. I guess let's go back in the panel.
Just to address Paradigm, like I think what I want to like articulate is like I totally get where you're coming from, and it does feel very lopsided to say like it was weighted heavily against this group for a long time, and now we're just gonna go even. That feels horrible, but like I don't see any other alternative. Like I totally understand, like it feels lopsided, like it was, heavily weighted against us, and now it's like we're even. That seems weird as well.
So you're making the point, and I get this flavor from people where they talk about, well, you've had 400 years. There was 400 years of slavery and oppression, so we have to flip the tables. We have to flip the script so that white people are treated with 400 years of slavery or oppression before the tables are even, right? We can't move forward with that until there's literally an evening of the score.
Just to be clear, I think everyone realizes that's like a horrible option and like we can't do that. I'm saying like our least bad option is to try and like even things right now and like move forward from it.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to figure out when you say that, one second, when you say that you're trying to even it out, you're just saying we just recognize that both terms are bad terms and just take them out of the lexicon in that way. Yeah, okay, exactly. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, well, I'm just like, if that was the take, why'd you have to go on that like weird road to get there? You know, I was trying to follow you, and I guess like it's a better way. But yeah, like that's the take, right? I don't see.
I would be interested
he was
to
just
hear the
confused on the
alternative.
take, so he was trying to put it into his words and see if it was agreement.
All right.
Yeah, like you're talking about how I was approaching it, Joe?
No, Red Pill was going down some road, and like there's like
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, well, hang on. I want to acknowledge the lopsided nature of it, and like hear if you have any alternatives to address it. I guess because it's so difficult to address.
I mean, stop using slurs.
A lot was said. I see why when I watch these with you people, it takes me a second to like pause the stream and really talk with my friend about what's going on. Let me see if I can do this the way I thought I was going to do it. So to address, I think I'm going to have to address both of y'all since y'all seem to be on the same point. Yay! Another person gets to tell me that, like, at this point in time, my feelings should be equated to yours regardless of the past. Because even though we together, I don't dislike any of you. I'm happy to be here. And I think Gender Juice said this already. There are differences between like social cultural racism and structural racism. Social and cultural racism were weaponized to create the kind of country or state of living that a lot of people have been living in since like this country started. For us to be able to sit here and say together that we should just stop doing it, it's like, well, what happens to those who aren't listening to us on the stream? What happens to those of us who aren't as plugged into the social norms or the contracts that we're building as a younger generation? What happens to those people who don't give a shit? If we're not going to tolerate anything, those people are the majority opinion still. Those people are the ones who, you like black people? That's cool. Well, I don't, so I'm going to hire you anyway. You're benefiting from the weakening of the possible fight against that structure at the same time as asking me to weaken my position to be as nice to you so I don't flip the table or make you feel like, oh, now you have to go through it. I don't want you to go through that. I want everybody to have healthcare. I want everybody to have student debt relief. I want everybody to live in a utopia. Yes, white and black people. I have a dream. We could play that whole thing over and over. But the scope of it is, do you have the right and ability? No, not the right. Do you have the ability to create such a discourse over this that, we got to ban 2 people without first acknowledging we haven't done anything in the past prior? We haven't done nobody really cared when it was bodies on the line, but we care when like people's feelings on a subject get hurt because they don't like the way it was said when there is no weight to it. It's just existing in that space. Right now, this discourse is existing within this space because something happened to 2 people that like should have been more clarified by Twitch. This is a problem between us and Twitch, recognizing and respecting our struggle and what we talk about and giving us the tools to be able to fight back against social and cultural racism, and from there create little breaks in the systemic issues. For us to sit here and say, well, yeah, it was 400 years ago, get over it, like they're both bad words. They're bad.
Look, hang on. You're just going on, and I think I get your political angle, okay? But the issue, you say, oh yeah, we say that there was 400 years of oppression, there was changes over that 400 years, okay, and things are a lot better than they were then, and they continue to get better incrementally because that's the nature of what our country is. I'm
sorry. No. I was saying, I thought you were looking at my face and you were like, and I was like, no, I'm just listening to you. Sorry. I do that. Sorry. I didn't know. My bad.
Look, to the extent that we have instances of racism or that we had structural or systemic racism that existed in the past, I have no problem with making sure that we have a history class for that we understand the lessons of that, and that we apply those moving forward, right? That's what we are supposed to do. That is what the founders intended when they said they wanted to create a more perfect union, okay? But to constantly dredge up and say that this is always the situation that was, and it therefore requires that we have to upend society, we have to do all of these other things that have no bearing structurally within our Constitution in the United States, okay? And to use the construct of racism or past racial problems to say that, okay, this is one of the reasons why we have to create this utopic society. It's a bullshit argument. And it's simply using race as a coercive mechanism to try to bring about the overthrow of a capitalist society in this country. And I don't subscribe to it. And that's your whole argument is based on that.
I don't think so. Actually, I can actually respond to this in a way that's concrete. Wouldn't this just be the same argument back at me? That we're using race as a mover to create a utopian society by banning a word that offends a group of people? Wouldn't that overlay all across the board?
I think we're looking for solutions, or like what you would offer.
I'm sorry. We ended up in that conversation. For your solution, you did ask that. That is fair. A solution would be, sadly, upending society. We'd have to implement this in the educational systems immediately. A way for us to be... Yeah, there's already a thing for that. Jesus Christ.
It's hard to deconstruct the ideas of race in general, which is like, I feel like we can all understand TOS is like only a mechanism we can use or a platform can use to just further, something that it seems like everybody on this panel seems to agree with, in which people shouldn't be judgmental or like be rude or derogatory or anything negative purely based on the content of one's skin, like word or not, it's a bad thing. It doesn't even need to be the word itself, which is the problem. It's the way that the word is used. Again,
intentionality.
You can replace the C word with white boy and basically the sentence would work the same. But like if you replace N word with like, I don't know, something else, it doesn't have the exact same effect, but in the same way it does. Not in the same way. In a way it does, but for the most part, we do understand there is a difference. And I feel like, again, we can all agree upon that. It's just that,
again, more stems back from not even school. I feel like it goes back to like your household, like how you are raised. Like your family is what like determines that. It's not like what the school teaches you, because I feel like most schools is basically like straight across the board, at least where I grew up. I don't know how it is where everyone else. I didn't have any racism in my school. Yes, I went to a primarily white school, but it was still like I still saw people of color, and I didn't think of them any differently. But growing up, like if your parents, your family members, like friends that live near you were making comments like this, yeah, you probably picked up on them very easily. Like I know people who are judgmental towards people with autism and stuff like that because that's how they grew up. But like I grew up in a household where my mom took care of autistic kids on a day-to-day basis, and like we went to bowling for autism and stuff like that, and we think of everyone the same person. We want to give them the same life and have the joy being around them. Like I don't see a difference in that. I don't see a difference in any of you compared to me other than, yeah, your skin color, but it doesn't change who I think of you as. Like that's not a thing. We're all here, we're all people, we're all alive, we all bleed red. Like that's a thing. Like there's no difference, and I don't give a fuck what anyone says. That's my belief, and it should be a belief across the board, but it isn't because of where you grew up and how you grew up, not what the school system teaches you.
But wouldn't the school system be a reflection of where and how you grew up? Because I teach in this system, and a lot of the kids don't know a lot of the concepts that I end up bringing up or that we end up talking about. A lot of the literature that we read, they don't have teachers who care enough to be able to bring a real world context within. Then we could talk about school funding, property taxes. It goes back to that's what I mean by school, because like I don't have kids, so I wouldn't put myself in a position where like the parents should teach it, because the parents could have come from an era where parenting and mental health and understanding the world wasn't great. And if they're going to stick in that position, the only people who spend more time or as equal time or near as equal time to your kids are pretty much going to be your teachers, your daycare. So like I'm on that form because like I've given up on parents a long time ago.
Parents as well, because we can turn it back to the sex education. Oh, well, that's for the parents to teach, and then the parents are like, oh, but that's for the school to teach, and like let's bounce it back and forth and see who catches it and hot potato, who's going to do it. Like it's never going to happen.
What kind of literature do you read with the kids?
Depends on which grade I'm teaching. I teach all the way from 5th grade to college.
What do you do with like the high school and college students?
It's usually goddamn Common Core stuff. But I could think like Catcher in the Rye, Albert Camus, just books you've probably read. social and Enigma books. Sometimes kids bring little suggestions to me, and sometimes we'll even make a whole lesson out of it. The last year I taught, we read an off book. It was called The Invisible Man. I don't know if you've ever heard it. And they all wrote their essays on that. And we ended up in the news because it was like, wow, these kids are really insightful. And it was a nice... So yeah, those are the literatures. I like my students.
Okay. I don't want to get it off topic, so I'll just keep that in my back pocket for now.
Yeah, I mean, so school reform. There's a lot of things we can do. Just so we're clear, like resorting to slurring the privileged people is not one of the things that we can do to improve things, right?
Correct.
I mean, there's a lot of things.
Correct. Yeah, that's not an argument. Well, I think that, especially with this discourse, I think that's the main problem, and that's kind of why I like myself. I don't see it as a discourse on that side of the topic. Like, is this okay? I feel like in every part of society, there are degrees to which things can happen, and those degrees are what create the balance. And I feel like we're more closely examining those degrees now and realizing that if this were an equal playing field, this would feel as bad. And then you're going to get somebody who says this isn't an equal playing field, so you shouldn't feel as bad. And it feels like it invalidates you because you're speaking from how you feel, and you would listen to somebody else speak to how you feel. My issue with that is, it's not about us, because none of us are going to roll up to one person's house and be like, fuck you say? But like, people who listen to us, people who hear this, hear a binary argument. And for me to play into that binary argument makes me say, well, you've gotten this like discourse for what, 5 days and you got a ban? I've been black in America my whole life, and nobody's banning the bad things for me. Then it's going to really start layering down. Like, you have the power to make change. You clearly have the power to make change because it happened. It took what, 2 days? I'm sitting here for 28 years.
So what is the change? What is the change that you need?
Societal reform to make those things.
Don't speak in generalities.
No,
give concrete specifics.
Okay. If we're gonna have a TOS that bans words based on their usage, then effectively we're gonna
about that. You are so far beyond words at this point. So what is your prescriptive remedy for society?
The entirety of society? I thought we were talking about TOS here.
Well, but you're saying, you basically said earlier that you needed to upend society, right?
Yeah,
I get that. I'm just looking for some actual concrete examples rather than just generalities.
I think it talks about a lot.
We should have a concentrated and dedicated effort on why minority groups in the United States are behind academically. This is something that can be done in a lot of ways. Like, one of the problems right now within education is that we know, for example, that black students are behind in math. We know that black students are behind in English. We know that black students are behind in science. And yet, when we have to have the conversation of having more concentrated understandings of why these students are struggling, it ends up being the argument of, well, this is too expensive, or we don't really have the resources to do that.
Is it as simple as funding and resources? Do you think that
when you have a school that doesn't have a single diversity and equity officer, and then they don't have anyone consulting with their black students, then of course you're going to have an issue where, like, if no one's concentrating on talking to these communities, and how are we supposed to start? That requires funding. Like, no one's going to do extensive research on communities as to why they're behind academically for free.
Okay, so when we look at schools like Philadelphia public school system and their outcomes and how they're so much worse, okay, than relatively speaking poor rural outcomes, why do you think that is? There's obviously more money in those school systems, so it's not a question of money. It's a question of approach. And it's a question of accountability. Look, I'll be honest, I think there's a large piece of this. There's a large chunk in what parents do to their kids. I think BuckOph might have said it, somebody else might have said it as well. When I grew up, and I grew up at the tail end of the civil rights movement before the civil rights, I was born before 1965. And I lived in Watts, okay? And I lived in a mixed race neighborhood. And I had a Mexican kid threaten to kill me and my brother when I was 4.5 years old. Okay. He was 12 years old, but we moved because, it was a safety issue for us. But my parents didn't teach me not to like Mexicans. okay, because of that instance. And I think that if parents are proactive, and I get there's a lot of reasons why some parents are unable. They don't have the right tool set because maybe they had kids, they dropped out of school, or they had kids early before they were 20. Okay. The things that are most likely to result in systemic poverty for people are having kids under 20 and not having a high school education. And it is less prescriptive, no matter what the teachers on this panel are saying, that how much money a school system spends per capita student, okay, is not as dispositive as those things. And then parents being more proactive about raising their kids properly and to have respect for other people.
But
right?
respect for other people is not going to improve test scores. Like, you're still going to have,
you know what?
You're still going to have concentrated funding in academic areas. And by and large, with the problems in Philadelphia, for instance,
but if your parents are involved, they help you in
academic areas. I don't know why people are still talking what I'm talking, but like the biggest thing that frustrates me is that yes, like we spend a lot of money as taxpayers towards school, and then the question that I keep positing is like, why aren't we having within the funding that we currently have targeted spending towards the areas that we're having trouble with? Obviously, the federal government might have to create support in those areas because right now they underfund education. But targeted funding does not necessarily mean targeted funding does not necessarily mean that we have to increase expenditures. Schools overfund in certain areas, much like they've underfunded in other areas. We can just analyze spending, but it has to be an analysis from district to district. There can't be this blanket all solution for every community because, like you said, the problems in Philadelphia are going to be totally different than the problems in Newark. They're going to be totally different than the problems in Sarasota.
Yeah, and I think
real quick, sorry to cut, but I want to throw it to KayBuckOph, and after that, I want to open it to people who haven't talked a lot so far. So yeah, gender Jews, collectively, everyone who wants to jump in. So yeah, KayBuck, go ahead.
So I understand it's the teacher's job to teach us shit, but it's not their job to baby every kid through school. It's not their job to be like, I'm going to help you through every step of the way. Yes, they're going to help you as much as they possibly can, but there's only so many hours in a school day. Once you go home, you have parents that are supposed to help you. They're supposed to be able to help you through these things. And yes, there is some parents that do underachieve in those aspects. I understand that. I had my parent, I'm 22 years old. My parents are 42 years old. My parents had me, if my mom had me 4 days before she turned 20, went through college, her first semester, and got pregnant with me. So she dropped out. And my dad never graduated high school. So yes, there is circumstances that don't work out for everyone, but my parents still tried their hardest to fucking help us through school. And if they couldn't help us, their friends, our neighbors, other people tried to help us because yes, it does take a village to raise a child. So yes, you have other people to help you. The teacher is not responsible for every single kid in that school to make it through that grade and be able to achieve things. It is nice for them to put in the work and the effort to try to do so, but it's not feasible. That's one teacher to 30 some students in that one class, not saying they don't have several other classes.
This take is kind of ridiculous because we understand that teachers are one individual that's supposed to assist students. This is why we have guidance counselors, academic advisors, nurses, extension staff that whether that be tutors or what have you. Like, it's not exclusively on the teacher, but there are areas where some teachers are the only individual that's there for academic assistance. I think you would agree, Kay, that that's a problem, no?
I would agree, but I wouldn't hold it solely on the teachers and the staff in the school. That is not, it's not feasible in most areas.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
I had tutoring, I had all this other shit, but it wasn't even feasible most days in even high school, where you have a separate block for study hall. A lot of this shit isn't feasible to have for all the students in that area. There's not enough of those teachers or enough of those staffs to be able to do said things.
Which is I think when it comes to
and I was in a higher school. Like, I was in a school that was public school, but it was in a higher, like, middle class area. So I would say that it was funded pretty good in compared to other schools.
I think when it comes to like education stuff, I think the school and the teachers are one of the least important parts to the success of a child's education. I think that they can help, but like if you look at an individual school, you know, all the students have access more or less, depending on what we're talking about, to similar or the same resources. I think that sometimes people are mystified when they look at education and they look at some public schooling districts and they say, look at how much money is being poured in and you're not getting the same outcomes. I think that there are things that happen at home that are just so much more important than anything that can happen in a school. If you have a parent that can stay home, stay on your ass about doing homework, encourage you to do
To be honest,
extracurriculars,
I
and
think
keep you out
the
of
whole
like.
education debate when it comes to like hatred and stuff like that is very, very silly. Because obviously I'm not American, I'm Scottish. And here, like at my school at least, there was a lot of Muslims, and I say like the P word was the main sort of slur thrown about there. So that's
I don't know what that
that's
is.
just like the main thing. Sorry.
I don't know what the P word is.
It's a
Well, we can't say it
Yeah. Let's wait then.
It's a pejorative
Okay.
word, right? It's intended to be a slur in that country.
Destiny, you were saying something on the lines of
Yeah, I don't think teachers can. I don't think
But
as
it's
a
not
teacher.
just used for people who are from that one country. It's used for like any sort of like Middle Eastern or Muslim person.
There might be.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a school environment. Like I went to quite an impoverished school. You can have a school environment that's like, in theory, you know, like less educationally benefiting and things like that, and people are more, in theory, more likely to be like hateful and stuff like that. But you can still decide, you know, how you behave as a person. Like I think it's quite silly to rely on like your environment to like teach you to be a decent human being. I don't agree with that argument.
I don't think that's what Destiny is positing, but I'd hope to get the whole.
Well, I
It's
totally
half
would
1 in the
posit
morning
that.
here, okay?
Wait, I
I'm trying to
totally
hear-
would posit that.
I
Of course,
kept
your
getting
environment is
cut
going to
off.
dictate what kind of person you become. That's absolutely true. Children are. I'm sorry. No offense. They're children. They don't know anything about being anything. That's why we teach them and educate
Well, no,
them.
that's really all I had to say on that. So.
Yeah. I mean, back to what I was saying. I think that like the home environment is absolutely paramount when it comes to the success or failure of a child's education. Like if you take a kid that has like a super strong family and they want that kid to get educated, you can put that kid in a really good private
CTV,
school.
We're waiting on
and
a
they can.
base take here. We're waiting on you to give us
What the
your
fuck
words
is going
of
on?
wisdom. I have no idea. It's like.
So
Can you not hear?
Wait. Hold up.
Does she have me muted?
Yeah, I mean, let Destiny finish making his point.
Destiny.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
yeah.
I got really mind. Oh, so we were all just in here quiet, and
That's
she.
why.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
I can't see Destiny's camera or Gender Juice's or Joe Lewis's either. I don't know why.
I think you need to refresh
respect.
because
We was like, what's going on?
Yeah, so I can't hear him whatsoever.
try to leave the Discord and join back. Try to leave the
Destiny-
Discord and join back.
You were saying something that I agree with you, right? Where there's only so much of the school.
Oh,
can do
I can see it. Okay, this is good.
There's only so much a school can do for a student.
Sorry.
Right?
Sorry.
For example, with COVID, right? Like there's one thing that conservatives like are kind of heralding right now, where it's like students aren't getting COVID in schools, and it's like that's true, but after school and after they leave this protected area, what's happening? Like students are contracting COVID through other means, have nothing to do with the school system altogether. This is why like we're seeing issues in Jersey with sports. So I totally agree with you that like, yes, teachers can do a lot to help students, extra curricular staff can do a lot to help students, but if the home situation is in a state of disarray or inconsistency, then that student's gonna always have problems.
Yeah, but are you saying it becomes then the totality of society's responsibility to fix broken homes?
Well,
And not
real
hold
quick,
parents accountable?
real quick, sorry.
What's the mechanism to fix that?
Real quick, sorry, I'm going to let you
Sorry.
respond, Joe, but like, Gender Juice has been waiting for a long time. I want to give him a chance to speak.
All right. So my main thing is that me as an individual, I'm gonna talk just a little bit about my personal experience because I myself am Pakistani Canadian, and I've been to Pakistan and I've seen how the school system works for the upper class and the lower class, which are two radically different just experiences in general. And then schooling in Canada, which is also extremely different. From what I've seen, it seems like you need a connection to a community to just like have a healthy socialization, and preferably a diverse community. That way you can actually engage with the people that are like of different races, different religions, and get more of a social understanding of like the nuances with each culture, so on and so forth. Because like in Pakistan, they have a vague idea of how it works in like the upper crust of society, because they're like, all right, we understand global history, so on and so forth. But when it comes to the lower class, they have to commute about like an hour 30 minutes from their village to a school, but then they have to walk, and then they have to bus, and then they have to take a train. I shit you not, that's what literally my dad did to get to college, and he barely passed. It's not just about, yes, it is a factor of like the conditions of the school, but it is to an extent a factor of the conditions of the home. I didn't have the support of the home life because both my parents were working hard, like they're working their ass off just so we had a house, I could eat, and I couldn't go to school. And I could only do so much because I was a kid. I didn't really understand the importance of all of this. Like, I would do my homework and I would do so much, but like, again, I couldn't socialize. I couldn't make the friends. I couldn't get to the top of the class. I couldn't push myself above and beyond to the place where I started to become, I guess, an exception to like what the status quo would have been for me. Yeah, I guess that's my take on it.
Are there any policy prescriptions for like how to address like home life and to improve or maybe like parent awareness about how to best help the kids and like foster an environment that helps them grow?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, parents have to be more actively involved in their students' education. And there are parents who are in places of privilege who don't do that. Now, but there's also parents who are in a lot of positions who they're unable to do that due to economic means. As an example, like it's very difficult for a parent to go to a school board meeting if the school board meeting's at 6 p.m. and they get off work at 7. Like, these are like little things. And then there's like the conversation, okay, if we want to understand about how our child's education is, we have to go to parent-teachers conferences. By and large, I have not seen a school that properly advertises parent-teacher conferences and follow-ups so that they can have teacher connect communication with the parents. And then you get the situation where like a student is failing and it's a 4th marking period and now the parent is activated. And I think that's fucking unacceptable. Like, a parent should be involved from the jump, from kindergarten up to the point, even when they get to their, whatever it is, their bachelor's degree or their master's. Like, parents, by and large, have to be more involved in their children's education. And there are barriers to that exist in the home. That could be things like work. They could be things like disability. And these are things that, from a societal aspect, we can address from like a political standpoint. But it can be very tricky. But it depends from one community to another.
And that's
earlier than that.
And that's what I wanted to build on, because as a teacher who's taught like around the country, I feel like what we view as teaching doesn't involve. Sometimes you just end up being that kid's parent. Like, I feel like when I say that, you're gonna want like the evidence, and I'm just gonna have to be like, just take a look around my neighborhood. Like, I can give
you an example if you want.
Please. I mean, I have my own, but like, yeah. Please.
I mean, like, there was a student that I worked with who didn't have a ride to marching band rehearsal, and he walked to rehearsal every day. And it was a 2.5-hour walk. He had to go home to babysit his sister, so he's round trip walking 4 hours. I legally cannot infer or ask anybody to see if they can assist them. I can go to guidance and see what they can do there, but there's only so much a guidance office can do if a child doesn't have the ability to get to the thing that they enjoy. Like, it can be little things like that. And then there's other examples like, okay, if you're in a community that has very poor infrastructure when it comes to plowing snow, and you're in an area like cities in New Jersey where the plowing system right now is very inconsistent. We have an understaffing problem right now with snow plowers, right? Currently, going into the fall season, that's going to pose problems if there's a snow day. Granted, we have a better virtual learning ecosystem, but even then, not every student is going to be able to go virtually if the power's out due to a snowstorm.
Well, it sounds like there's a great opportunity. There's a great opportunity here, right? With, us being in the unique position that we are as Twitch streamers and us learning the intricacies of actually connecting with people. So why don't we start, say, putting this idea out to the school boards, right, where they create a Discord for their school. They advertise that they're going to be having these Discord meetings. Why not?
Because the violation of FERPA.
Violation of FERPA?
Yes.
Why can't?
And Discord right now is not FERPA compliant. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which makes it that only specific information about students can be disclosed, and there's certain types of privacy laws.
We're not talking about.
You can do it over Zoom.
Absolutely, you cannot.
Listen, we're not talking about. That's not what we're talking about. You're conflating the two fucking things. Now, what we're talking about is the fucking teachers' meetings, the parent-teacher. Like, you may not be able to do parent-teacher conference, right? That needs to be an in-person thing. But when you're talking about things that are going on at the school, the different events that are going on, getting people involved, involved, you could definitely do something like that just to make people aware of what's going on with the community, right?
Yeah,
That's
you
what
could
you want. Is you want more people involved. So
You can
instead of trying to throw up bury, like the shit as to excuses as to why not, take a look at what you could use it for, so then that way you could actually get people engaged and involved.
You can advertise as much as you want, which is one of my arguments, right? I said that there should be better advertising for that. But when it comes to the certain ecosystems, like for example, Discord, we know a lot of individuals, especially a lot of students are in Discord. We can't use Discord as a means for educational communication because of violation of FERPA.
That's a semantic argument, Joe. There are
it's not a semantic argument because there are ways.
But there's other platforms.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of platforms that are FERPA compliant or put in such a way
Zoom,
that students
Zoom and Teams.
So if I'm a teacher, there's only very few set amount of apps.
Just reminded me of somebody that's just
Wait,
trying to shoot
wait,
holes
wait.
or something.
Wait. Please. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
I'm trying to explain the problems in digital communication, which is something you and I both agree upon is an issue. I'm trying to lay you out the barriers that currently exist. Is that something I'm allowed to do right now, or do you want to move on from that?
Well, I think that in the interest of the rest of the room, right? Like all I'm probably going to hear.
We'll move on. Say less.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. When it comes to how far and down we've gone into this discourse, I'm just reminded yet again, and this isn't a slight to anybody here, because I obviously respect everybody. I've told you before, I've been in some panels with you guys. I watch your content. Like, I wouldn't sit here and be like, oh, I hate you, and then like, subscribe. I feel like the disconnect is starting to become where we all grew up, because some of us have seen the issues and know that like there's just no way around it. To survive, to be in this country and be poor and to survive requires a lot more of a groundwork, a framework for how the family home unit should exist, how much parents should be in kids' lives, how much the teachers can be involved, what compliances, what rules can we break, who will care if we break them. And those rules and those barriers are heavily enforced down here, and they are not enforced up there. And when we talk...
Wait, did anybody disagree with anything that's been said so far? I feel like we're all relatively in agreement in terms of like it takes a village to raise a kid, that if you're poor and you're out of luck, like if your parents can't help you, like I think we all largely agree on this stuff. No, am I missing something?
Yeah, you are missing something.
We're just choosing which part is the issue. So it's whether it's the teachers, whether it's your home environment. It's still all of the environment, but we're critiquing every little piece of which one we actually align with.
Yeah, not everybody has Jeff Bezos money. Okay, there are economic classes, there are economic strata that have to be countered with or contended with. And it is true that if you are on the lower end of the economic spectrum, like me, Dirt had more money than me growing up. Okay, but I had parents who taught me that work ethic mattered, respect mattered, and that you took advantage of every opportunity, no matter how slight, that you could do something with it. And for me, that meant getting out of high school, not having enough money to go to college, going into the military, saving up my money, and then going to college. Okay.
So,
hang on, Joe. Let me finish my point.
Absolutely.
The idea that because people are born into circumstances of less economic means doesn't mean that we need to teach those kids to be jealous of people who have more economic means. We can look at society and we can use our tax system in a way that is fair, more fair than what I would submit that people on the left want it to be, and want basically redistributive economics. That's not going to fix anything. We've seen that when we throw just millions and millions and billions of dollars at education, that has not had a prescriptive answer. We just see more kids with more problems. And then we say, well, the problem is, as Joe and ParadigmShift have alluded to, or actually stated in their points, was that the reason why these kids can't succeed isn't just because of these things. It's because their parents have problems. They can't get off work. They can't go to school board meetings. We can't find some kind of technology that we've used for the last 18 months in the era of COVID, where we're teaching kids with Zoom and Teams and things and tools like that, that we can't co-opt those tools, or we can't get with our legislators to be able to say, you know what, let's make some exceptions, or work with the vendors to make these things compliant, so that we can do these things, that we can provide extended reach where parents don't have to get on the road at a certain point of time in order to make these things work. And then furthermore, finally, we can, as a society, as teachers, as educators, as school administrators, we can work with our parents to make sure that they are informed and that they understand the impact that they have in their kids' lives, so that they don't have their kids growing up where they get out of Philadelphia schools and 65% of the kids in Philadelphia schools can't do basic math or reading.
But
That's not a money problem. It's an approach problem.
Well, I mean, but still, like, these things have to be paid for, right? Like,
they are paid for, Joe. This is the point I'm trying to make.
That's not necessarily the case. Like, we saw through the like, you can look at the COVID funding that was given towards schools. An overwhelming majority are going to spend that on teachers and guidance counselors. So it's very clear that districts are struggling with the cost to have extra staff to make sure students are taken care of within the buildings. Unless you don't believe that the schools should be using the funding on hiring more teachers and guidance counselors in this context.
I feel like, again, as a teacher, the discourse is missing the forest for the trees, because unless anybody's been in a classroom in the last 10 years, I can tell you right now that the identity of the resources that schools claim they have can be the same as another school's, but they're vastly different. Everybody has history textbooks. Are your history textbooks updated correctly? Who were they written by? Who wrote those curriculums? Who did those things? These are questions that parents can't ask because there's no time to ask them. You'd have to gain a coalition. A lot of parents don't have the time to build a coalition. It's just a fact of, like, life. It's just a fact of being a parent, a minority parent, a parent who's struggling with money, a parent who doesn't have the tools because they weren't taught from their parents. There's a lot of generational issues. There's a lot of, and to say that we throw a lot of money at the school system also misses the point of, as Joe just said, where that money goes. And my biggest issue with even talking about that is, like, I've seen where the money goes. And I've seen people get, sorry, I apologize.
Where the money goes in your experience. That's not,
I mean, I've seen where the money goes as far as teachers unions and me going around to different states and going to different districts and asking these questions. I was part of that movement to actually bring to light what these type of budgets are actually servicing. Where does every penny go? Why are teachers having to pay out of pocket when we just got $17 million in funding? Where did that go over that period of time? I can tell you, but, like, if I tell you after,
is there some kind of corruption? Where does it go? I don't understand.
Take out the tinfoil hat. It's okay. There's a bunch of things to that, right? Where individual districts will have different types of funding for different types of situations, and then you have different. And again, this is going to vary from one state to another. The biggest problem that I'm noticing is that people have a very separated understanding of how your tax dollars go towards education. And then there's things that have concentrated funding. Like, for example, if you have if you see a nice, beautiful new theater that got built in a school district, that probably had some level of targeted funding. And maybe there was some state tax involved in terms of, like, the parking lot. You might see a situation where, all these teachers got a raise. Maybe that was due to a collaboration with adjusting budgeting from one fiscal year across X amount of years. Like, funding within is vastly different. My argument still stands in that we're seeing that schools, when they are given resources, they do well. Like, right now, under the USDA, you have the option to have free grab-and-go lunches for the entire year. And this is something, and that's an amazing policy, because not every student is going to have the money to buy lunch, as sad as that, or sad or ridiculous as you might believe that to be. But then the question is, like, okay, if we can do this under COVID, if we can give free grab-and-go lunches to all 50 states, is that something that's actually sustainable outside of a COVID landscape? And then maybe we ought to look into something like that, you know?
I think when we look at this from the left and the right, I think the problem is that we left-leaning people in general, and especially in regards to education, tend to have like these external forces that they want to use to push kids towards getting more educated. And the external push is usually like more funding or assistance on like the institutional side. So in this case, education. But the problem, I think, with conservatives, the reason the disconnect happens is because conservatives see it as more of an internal push needed. And there's some validity to that. You can take a kid in a really good family and send him to a garbage school, and that kid is going to come out pretty smart because his parents are going to be on him for it. You're not going to get a kid in a really well-adjusted family going to even the worst fucking school, coming out not knowing how to read. That's not going to happen because mom is going to be there every day making sure he's doing even bad homework, and that's going to get solved, right? So I think the issue that you have here is that when you, on one end, if you take a conservative person that has a conservative outlook on life and he knows that good families tend to produce well-educated, good children, irrespective of their educational institutions, and then you look at it from the left and you see, well, some public school districts have a ton of money thrown at them, and we don't have the results that we're supposed to have. It's not happening. We're not getting the payoff for it, right? I think that you have to find a way to bridge that gap. I think that there are certain things, and you mentioned one thing, it was incredibly fucking good. It should never, ever be a question, ever. If anybody thinks different, you're just dead wrong. It should never be a question if a kid can get a good meal. It just absolutely should never be a question. So things like funding, in some school districts, they've even done breakfast or lunch for kids. That's an amazing use of money. Feeding kids, it's like you take $1, you put it into food, and it goes into a kid's mouth. That's an amazing expenditure of money, you know? But all the other money, you know, like I think there's a legitimate question there of like, well, why do we have some school districts that are so overfunded and we're not seeing the results that we would expect to see? Whereas you can go to these like poor as fuck, redneck, hick communities, and you get these really poor districts or whatever, but then you're getting kids that can read and they do math at like, as you would expect them to do, like maybe slightly below average, but they can do it, right? Where is this disparity of outcomes explained by for left-leaning people that are like, we just need to throw more and more money at it? I think that's the issue that you're running into.
I'll tell you, 80% of the high school kids in my graduating year went to college. 80%.
How many of them?
And where did you go? Sorry to cut you off.
Wait.
I went to school in a rural South.
Wait. Sorry to cut. Gender Jews, go ahead, and after that, KayBuckOph.
I'm sorry. I don't like interrupting because I actually am enjoying the conversation that's been happening so far. And from like I am of the side of actually in the middle of both of these. Oh God, I feel like a centrist. But like from the perspective of like Joe Lewis and like Paradigm, I do actually understand that because like with my school, like the high school that I went to like 2 years ago, we only had 4 it's called, I guess, resource officers for the students, and that would cover, if I'm correct, close to 300 students. Our school could only hold about 250 students. Some students couldn't even go to class and have a locker to like place their belongings. They would need to like come in and out. It was a whole mess. They didn't have the proper funding to have like enough infrastructure to even handle this amount of kids. And we also have to look at like the private schools, who obviously do get more funding because they're private institutions. But where I live, and I'm in Canada, I'm in Alberta, we also give public funding to them. And so they've got a little bit of a cherry on top situation there. But with me, from the, I guess, angle of the conservatives, I do get that. Yes, like I explained a little bit earlier about my early education. I didn't really care. My family were immigrants. They were just trying to like, survive and make it good here. I myself, again, didn't care to begin with. But when I got into high school, I was given the choice of taking the regular course or taking IB. So I took IB. I thought, you know what? I feel like I myself am smart enough and I can put myself up to that challenge and push myself forward. But I know that doesn't apply to everyone because out of all my friends, I was the only person that was in IB. I was the only person that decided to go from a mainstream course and challenge myself and push myself further. I tried to do this with my friends, but again, everybody's different. They were more worried about their own social life and their own like personal lives because like they had to try and keep themselves alive. They had their own like personal home life issues that they had to deal with. And yeah, I get this. There are benefits of like making it so that the institution itself functions with the capability of handling everyone to the point that it is now only up to the individual to push themselves even further. That is sort of like what my ideal schooling situation would be. Yeah.
KayBuckOph.
I just think the bigger issue, and like everyone has touched on it, but they're jumping around it, is parents. And like the more perfect union, you said it perfectly. Like people who are having children under the age of 20, like my mom got pregnant with me 4 days, or she gave birth to me 4 days before she turned 20. Like that shit was hard on her. She had to struggle through life. She didn't have a good paying job. Like my mom just now recently got a good paying job, and like yeah, it's 20 fucking years later. That didn't help me when I was in school. The only reason I'm here and has achieved as much as I did is because my grandfather was able to stay at home because he was disabled and able to help me through everything. And I understand not everyone has those luxuries, but why don't we focus on the bigger issue of like teen pregnancy, having kids in lower income areas earlier in life and affecting their chances of getting out of those lower income environments. Like if you waited, like I love kids. I would love to have kids. I would have them now if it was feasible, but I can't because I'm in college and I would like to get my education set up so that me and my fiance have good paying jobs before I have a kid. So yes, I take birth control, use protection. You do these things during sex and make sure that you aren't having kids. And if we taught this education to people and we showed them, instead of the luxury of a teen pregnancy show on MTV, we could show them how shitty shit actually happens and what fucks up your life. Maybe people would realize, hey, I probably shouldn't be having unprotected sex with 7 people in a year and go around willy-nilly, no fucks given, and have kids all the time. Like that's not okay. I know a 16-year-old that has 4 kids. It's like that's crazy.
When you get people that are saying these things, right? So from the conservative approach of like we need to do something to strengthen the families, to do something to the families, that's absolutely true. But then conservatives are against every single thing that would do that. So for instance, you talk about teen pregnancies, it's conservatives that are pushing to get abortions banned from everywhere, right? Conservatives are the ones that push to get rid of contraception provided for teenagers. Conservatives are the ones that push to get rid of sex education in schools. Conservatives are the ones that push against most of the policies that would cause the biggest change in the amount of teen pregnancies. And then they turn around and they say, well, why are people having kids out of wedlock? Why are people... I'm absolutely right. I'm sorry. Well, I come from a Catholic family. I know that I have a kid at 21. I absolutely know this is true. I've lived the life, and I know the rhetoric is true because I've lived in the families and the Catholic communities. I went to a Jesuit high school. I've lived my whole life in conservative areas. I know that every single part of this is true. Okay.
To be fair, that is shifting slightly. We have seen abortion has gone down progressively throughout the years since the 80s. We've seen things like contraceptive be more acceptable in the Catholic Church. The Pope has actually come around and said, like, hey, this is something we need to push for. We need to help
alleviate those illegal things. Now.
Right, but the thing is, like, not everybody's
I'm pro-choice.
Right, but we
no one
make
cares
it clear.
That you're pro-choice. I'm saying that conservatives that focus on the family have now established a bounty hunting.
But it is shifting.
Hold on. We've done a lot of talking about conservative viewpoints here, right? The one thing that you haven't brought up, Destiny, at all, right, is the fact that the reason why that they don't want the education being there is specifically because once you normalize the language, then you actively put it into the minds rather than it being something that is like, okay, here's the facts of this.
CTV.
It's
if
already
you think
there,
that you need an
CTV.
external thing to put sex into the mind of a teenager, I don't even know what to say.
It's already there. That's true. 100%. That's true.
Yeah,
I agree with that. The fact is that when you normalize this language, it needs to be It needs to be normalized between the parents and the kid, and not between.
It doesn't. As a white kid in the United States, white parents, especially Christian.
Wait a second, you're white.
As a white kid in the United States, white
You're
parents
white? Hold on, that's not what I heard.
I'm making a serious point, okay? White parents do not talk to their children about sex, okay? Half the fucking white girls in this country have their first period. They don't even know what the fuck is happening to their bodies, okay? The other half of the people have never had my parents have never talked about sex my entire fucking life, and I know that.
No, I went to school, and the only thing I learned was abstinence. That was it.
Exactly. Yes. So no, I would agree with you. This is the thing that bothers me about conservatives as well. I think somebody else brought this on this panel. Conservatives will say shit like, "Oh, these conversations should happen in the home." Yeah, they should, but they don't. So it has to happen at school, or else it's only going to happen on the internet and porn forums, or amongst their friends, or with their doctor when their girlfriend is 6 months pregnant. They're trying to figure out why their belly's so big and she's missing her periods. That's the only time these conversations happen because conservative parents don't talk to their children about these things. Because for some reason, when conservatives turn 30 years old, they forgot every fucking thing about being a kid. And I don't know because your conservative parents, they were fucking when they were teens. Because half these conservative parents have children when they're in their fucking teens. And somehow they think that they're a sweet little child at 16 who's going to spend the night at their boyfriend's house playing Super Smash Brothers all night. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, I don't know what it is, but when conservatives turn 30, they forget everything about being a child, and they won't have any of these conversations in the home with their children. So it seems like it's kind of necessary to make them happen in other environments, like at school.
Yeah, but
wait, no. I want to phrase to more perfect union.
Talk to as the Jesus
Wait, Red
fuck.
Pill
Go
has
ahead.
had his hand
More
up for
perfect
a
union.
while.
Go ahead.
Yes, Red Pill has
More
it.
perfect union.
No, fuck this shit, man. I got
No, more
Please.
perfect
Point is gonna be
union.
super short.
I got directly fucking addressed there, right? You know what?
Well,
Fuck this.
okay.
Go ahead, geek. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So just a quick point there, Destiny. The whole thing with trying to overturn Roe v. Wade isn't necessarily to outlaw abortion on a national scale, it's to put it back into the hands of states. And the other part is that if kids were taught how to value themselves more appropriately, they might take better choice. They might use protection. They might choose to wait until they were in a more stable relationship, or wait till after they were out of high school or whatever before they would engage in behavior that in an unprotected way is more likely to lead to that kind of negative outcome that results in the kind of generational poverty we've seen for fucking 60 years.
Well, who does
so
that?
But this is part of the problem, right? We're talking about how parents have to have a relationship and be able to explain to their children, or be more active in their kids' lives, in their education, in their personal, their social development, and also in their sexual development, as going from kids to like tweens to teens to adults. And the problem is that in this society, what we have done is we have allowed the federal government, or government generally, to become the nanny state, so that the government's responsibility is to do these things. That's why we try to push this bullshit down to them, down their throats, about all different kinds of sexual things, technique or whatever, in grade school and middle school, high school. That's not really the appropriate place for that to be. That's exactly what happens, Joe.
But the problem is, I feel like
let's talk about this. I want to see.
Hold on, I just want to let me close it up to Destiny's point. Right, the idea that people that want to outlaw abortion at a federal level, are not trying to, outlaw a means of birth control. And matter of fact, the people who support abortion nationally say that it isn't a birth control. It's a women's health choice. So you can't have both of those things be true at the same time.
We're not talking about the semantic argument if it's a birth control or not. We're talking about not having a child out of wedlock. However you want to phrase that semantically, whether you call that.
You led your comment saying that if you wanted to prevent these things, then you're trying to outlaw things like abortion, so that you inextricably link the 2 points.
Well, does abortion prevent the birth of children out of wedlock?
Is it the question is, from a moral perspective, is it a means of birth control, or is it a means of health?
That's a boring question. I
feel like we can all agree that
is totally irrelevant. Nobody cares about the
have-
answer whether it's birth control or not. It's whether or not it restricts people from having children out of wedlock. That's the interesting question, right?
You're discounting the fact that the vast majority of conservatives who are opposed to it believe that abortion is currently used in the United States as primarily as a means of birth control.
That's fine that it's used as a means of birth control. But the problem I'm having is that conservatives are setting unrealistic expectations on their children, right? Like, you'll have a conservative that, no offense, there's a lot of conservative people that got pregnant at 17 and got married, and then they have kids, and then they're going to act like, oh, well, my kids aren't going to deal with sex until they've graduated with their fucking master's degree. Like, that's just not realistic,
I think this is more towards a religious aspect of conservative, because my parents are conservative, and I would say that I am a conservative. And we were not religious, not raised religious in any way, shape, or form. My parents, yes, didn't teach me about sex, but they were very adamant about, hey, I found out you were having sex. You're going to go to the gynecologist. You're going to get put on birth control, because I don't want you to be living in the same situation I did. I fucked up and didn't talk to you about sex. I'll claim that mistake. That was my bad. And then we talked about it with my younger sisters. I've even had conversations with my parents and my sisters to teach them, because I am the oldest. So the mistakes happen with me, and I end up teaching my younger sisters.
Did your parents teach you about safe sex practices outside of birth control?
No, they were like, here, go to the gynecologist, and the gynecologist will figure it out. And so I understand that.
People like my parents don't, because my parents are immigrants. We're socially
They also now know
They
this.
don't teach me this kind of stuff. I have to learn it myself, either from
But
school.
I know this, that it's not okay to just do that, or go to school and be like, hey, my friend told me X, Y, and Z, or go to Pornhub, go X, Y, and Z, or go to fucking whatever site you're learning shit on that teaches you. I listened to a podcast the other day about a woman who believed that if she jumped down the stairs or did jumping jacks after sex, that the sperm wouldn't travel up her vaginal canal because gravity would pull it out and she wouldn't get pregnant. This is the shit people are believing because we're not teaching it to either the parents aren't teaching it or the teachers aren't teaching it. So let's play hot potato and see which one lands and
Somebody
which
needs to
one's
learn.
going to teach it. Somebody's got to do it.
Well, I mean, look, in the age of modern search engines, somebody has an excuse to say they can't learn.
All right,
Okay,
Galactic Galactic Fear, Dr. Red Pill, and Paradigm. Sorry. Galactic Fear, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, so I think the whole point is that sex education at schools fucking sucks. It always has. Probably will for a long time yet. I don't agree with the whole abstinence-only education. It seems to happen a lot in the US. Thankfully, that doesn't quite happen here, but sex education is still very, like, heterosexual couples pushed. And I also think, like, the whole argument about, like, children out of wedlock and stuff, like, why does that even matter? Like, why should someone need to be married to have a child?
It's a religious belief.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. But, like, outside of that, like, there's still some people who are like, oh, no, like, you need to, like, be older and, like, have a job and, like, get married and then have kids. Like, that's just, like, a whole social thing and, like, a story which doesn't really apply to, like, our lives anymore, because marriage used to be a way for women to sort of have more importance, if that makes sense. Like, I work with a lady who's in her 50s, and then apparently just before she got married, women couldn't have, like, any access to, like, their husband's will or anything like that if they weren't married to them, like, when they died. And, like, yeah,
that's still like that in a lot of countries. I mean,
Yeah, like in Pakistan,
it's a legal construct. It's not.
Most places, women
legal,
still
like,
have
All right.
why does being married make someone a better parent? It doesn't.
Because because more like two people have the ability to make more money than one by and large. Like, marriage is an economic exchange more than it is an exchange of love, and a lot of countries believe that to be so.
I mean, hold on. We can't be. Okay, this is some crazy. This is like way
we're kind of getting off track.
This is
a little bit.
way too far to
Greek
left.
is
Maybe
trying to pass it to Red Pill.
Oh, okay, sorry, good.
Yeah, Red Pill.
Yeah, so I just want. Look, I think it's so hard to reach parents, and it's like every person reaches this threshold of, like, adulthood where you become, like, your ego kind of takes over and you don't want to take advice or, like, education from other people. Do you know what I mean? So, like, it seems so hard to break this cycle where we have access to kids and, like, the ability to teach them young, and, like, but, like, there's this cycle happening with their parents not doing a good job, and, like, the parents are failing to some extent, and it's producing kids who are not prepared to be good adults who become bad parents, and that happens again. So, like, with Joe Lewis, I was trying to get at, like, what policy prescriptions we could go to like, fix this, and it seems like funding is pretty much our only option. So, like, instead, funding schools is one way to go about it. I don't know if there's a way to reach parents and, like, sort of break through that ego barrier and, like, get them to do things better in, like, raising.
That's why I said there needs to be a concentrated and dedicated effort from the schools to make sure that the parents know the resources at the schools and are able to utilize those resources. Like,
do you think that would be effective?
Of course it would be effective. Like, if you make sure that parents know the resources at the school and know how to access the resources and utilize them, I don't know why you wouldn't think that would be an effective thing to do. Like,
well, I mean, if they're in, like, poverty and
I don't care if they're poverty status. Like, they should know the resources of the school and how to use them.
Well,
I don't care if they have no money or all the money in the world. They should know the resources.
What about, like, one-on-one time at home, and if, like, encouraging them to read books? What if it's like, you think it's possible?
Yeah, and teachers can encourage that with parents, but then the buck goes to the parents at that point. Because I can tell my student as much as I want until my face is blue, hey, if you practice your saxophone or clarinet, you're going to have a much easier time in band class. I can say that until I'm blue in the face. But if a parent does not have a concentrated effort of being involved in the educational process of learning an instrument, then what are they supposed to do? And then this is constant cycle of parents saying, I don't know why my student's practicing. Well, it's like, are you involved in the process of practicing with your child? And some parents are like, well, I don't have enough time for that. And it's like, well, if you don't have enough time for that, I don't know what to tell you. Because as a teacher, I can't force your child to practice. And then I just turn into a babysitter, which is fine.
That's what I'm saying. And we keep seeing this failure of funding to, like, enact that kind of change you're talking about. It just seems like the apathy of the parents can't be overcome by, like, asking them to do better.
Well, it can, but it's going to require, like, a dedicated effort in making sure people understand what the stakes are. Like, we know that if your child does well in school, you're going to have better chances of going to college and going to the schools that you want to and have more access to opportunities of schools. Like, there's only so much I can explain to a student if they have a 3.2 GPA and the program requires a 3.7 at graduation. We can't extra credit our way up those extra points, you know?
Well, yeah, I just come back to the point that it's problematic to say that the issue for kids not being effective in education is simply that we need to throw more money at them, or we need to sort of level out that playing field. If we have, I would posit that if we have school systems that are well funded but have poor outcomes, we should enable parents in those school districts to be able to send their kids to other schools that have better outcomes. And that money that we have, one second, the money the money that's going to the bad school system should be able to follow the kid to the other school. So I'm a big fan of charter schools, public charter schools, private charter schools, and public option charter schools. Okay.
Yeah. How do you pay for the? I have a very simple prescriptive question.
There is at least some evidence that these kinds of approaches force more competition within the education system, which result in better outcomes for students in both types of schools.
How would you pay for the busing? Who should pay for the busing?
The busing is going to the money for the so busing is part of the local school district, right? That's not federal dollars. Sure. Okay.
So here's the problem.
Here's the school.
I'm going to lay you a very simple hypothetical.
You asked me a question. Let me at least answer the question.
I'm going to give you a floor.
Question.
I can give you a better hypothetical so you can answer this to the best of your ability. Can I do that?
So we're going to drop the last hypothetical.
I'm going to give you a hypothetical about busing. I'd like for you to answer that. Is that okay?
Sure. It's a different question, but sure.
Well, I mean, it's a problem. So if I feel that my student is not succeeding in this school academically, so I want to send them to another institution, I believe that my tax dollars should go towards funding to this other school. However, there's still the issue of busing, which is done at the local level. Who is going to pay for the busing of that student? Is that burden going to go to the parents? Is that burden going to go to the school? Who's going to pay for the busing for that child to go to that school?
Okay, so at a base level, right? If a parent is going to move a kid, or going to have the option to move a kid from one school to a different school, chances are that competitive school or that other school is going to be in the same general area, and that they probably have transportation systems worked out. If they don't, and then it's not an option for the kid, right?
We see this all the time with
the kid is still going to be stuck
schools.
in that particular school.
We see this all the time in parochial schools with public schools. They share busing. This is a pretty common thing, at least where I'm from.
But I'm talking about the concentrated busing of individual students from one school to another. So you're saying that
that's not usually how that works. It's usually
I understand that's
usually on a logistic basis
based on
whatever the most efficient path is, and that's how they usually do it for the parochial schools, and as well as magnet schools. We already see many examples of this.
And I understand that, but if we're saying the tax dollars are going to another institution, that would imply that that school is out of district, or even out of the county itself, and the local municipality. So
out of the district is not out. Yeah, but out of the school. Look, out of the school district means any school not part of the district taxing authority. It could be in the same geographic location. Okay, like county location. So that I really don't think
you're catching what I'm throwing here. So
no, you're trying to equate.
Joe, I think what Joe is saying is when you get out of the bounds of like the normal districts. I think is that what you're saying, Joe? When you're getting when you're sending people further than what would be normally attributed to like a school.
Yeah,
district.
but it remains to be seen. It remains to be seen that there is a geographic further. It just means it's a different organizing entity.
We would have to look at, and then also too, let's say if your tax dollars are going to another area and there's an over expenditure, what should happen to that additional money? Should that be a voucher that the student could use towards, like, say, luncheons and stuff like that for the school? Should it be some type of tax credit? Like, what would be your prescription for that? Because a school can be underperforming for a lot of reasons.
Sure, and I think that to the extent that those things exist, and I think that it is a problem, like that is an issue that's been addressed with public charters, right? That there are kids that are coming in that are poor, and then they're bringing voucher dollars into it. They're bringing donations. They're able to fundraise and do things like that, so that the parents tend to be more actively involved. So they tend to do things that tend to support those charter schools more efficiently. And I can look something. I can look something up and bring it back and talk to you on your channel, but you'd have to unban me first.
You've been unbanned for about 3 months now. You can go into my
that's
chat
not
right
true.
now and look for yourself.
I bet you
All
if I
right,
go.
bet. Do you want me to share my screen and show you?
We don't
so
need to
can put this
have
the
this.
Okay.
This is not
I
relevant.
don't know what else to tell you.
No.
So
All right.
ask the question. So I'm gonna ask it again in a different scenario. School B is the school that you're currently at, and you believe that your child is not getting a sufficient education in your school. The cost per student in that school is an average of $700 for tax expenditures. This is not how funding works, but we're going to say it costs $700 towards taxes. The other school, per student, it's $400, and that's the school you want to send your child to. And both districts agree, and that's all in the books. There's an over expenditure of $300. Where should that money go?
Should you be used to? Okay, I get your hypothetical.
Okay.
That $300, that extra tax money should go into the school to be offered as a voucher for some kid who can't afford it. Or to go to a program that facilitates the education.
So how would they determine a student who would be needy for that? Is that something that parents should apply for? Is that something from a lottery?
No, it could be, you could make it income based. You could. There's all kinds of criteria that you could apply.
You can't disclose. You're not allowed to know the income of parents unless they relinquish that information.
Okay, so you ask them. Do you make it available as call it a scholarship grant?
Would you be comfortable for a survey of that, of schools knowing your financial? That seems like a very easy way for implicit bias.
How do they handle free and reduced lunch then? If
you have to actively apply for it.
It wouldn't be implicit bias.
Okay, so they could just make it an opt-in program.
But that's not what your question is asking. The idea behind it is to say if somebody is going to a charter school and they can't afford like the component that the parent might have to bring into a charter school, and then the school has an excess of funds because of other things that they're doing, or they have good property taxes that they can apply, or whatever the funding mechanisms they have are, and then they have an excess supply, and then they want to make that available so that other kids can have a good educational outcome. Remember, education's about the kids, right? So if they can more effectively, efficiently use that money to help more kids, as opposed to keeping them trapped into an underperforming or failing school that may be funded to a better degree, may have more riches or whatever, but still have poorer outcomes, then I think we should all be celebrating the fact that these schools are trying to do right by the kids. And maybe the public school systems, which are rife with union rules and like, look at what happened in COVID, all the stuff that the unions fought to keep the schools from opening up, despite the evidence in the science that said that kids were at less risk of catching or transmitting COVID. And then they forced these schools to shut down. They forced them into virtual only classes, where we now look at and studies have come forward that say the kids are 4 to 6 months behind in math, 4 to 6 months behind in reading. Okay. And then we still want to keep pumping money into public school systems where these kids have shit educational outcomes.
That's
so
weird.
Let these other competitive educational opportunities.
We don't need a gift scale
and then evaluate them for what they are.
Come on.
I'm confused.
All right, real
because,
quick.
Sure.
Sorry to cut, but I want to pray to other
that,
people.
Guys, and with that, I would love to keep talking, but I'm going to have to dip out. I told Danabo, so I don't know if there's anybody else waiting in the wings. Joe, I'll drop by your site and we can chat some more, because I have been interested in wanting to talk to you, and I'm glad that I'm not banned. So I'll talk to you later.
Yeah,
right,
sure.
give yourself a shout out, More Perfect Union, and yeah.
Okay, so I am the More Perfect Union. I stream occasionally at twitch.tv, the More Perfect Union. I'm also on YouTube and a couple other places, but I don't really do too much with those yet. Most of the time you can find me yakking it up on somewhere in the conservative space or whatever, Buckeye, CTV, and some others. I am a constitutional conservative. I believe that if we want to have these different kinds of societal structures, I'm not necessarily against them. I'm just saying let's try to get them done in a constitutionally appropriate way and not keep bending or contorting things like the Commerce Clause to be able to get to them. So with that said, it's been interesting. There's a lot of guys here, a lot of people on the panel tonight that I have not really talked with before, and grateful for that opportunity to be able to come in and talk to you guys, and hope you have a good rest of your night and a good rest of your weekend. Y'all take care, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Have a great holiday, MPU.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Paradigm.
Okay, so that was a lot. I had some responses ready here and there, and I kind of lost them because ADHD brain. So let's try this. Kids are behind in school because we tried to adopt a college level lifestyle to a bunch of people randomly and they don't know how to really deal with it. We didn't give any emotional or mental support towards these kids. We kind of just said business as usual and expected them to carry on, even though we were invading their personal lives by being on the device that they normally use to disconnect from us. This is what I mean about saying the perspective of like somebody who lives here versus somebody who just talks about it. Like, I can tell you with experience, the reason why kids are behind is because everybody's behind, because there was no tools given to help us transition. We did not give kids a break off. We worked them harder because we expected them to be able to do more because they were at home more. And we thought that with them being home more, that their home life would turn into this magical oasis where it would become a school-friendly or a learning-friendly environment, and we did not account for any of the factors outside of which people have been talking about here all day, which are the parents. For that, and I'll keep it to that because I feel like if I were to spiral off, I could do it, but I'm not gonna. Parents. At some point, I have to absolve parents of the guilt of not being able to prepare their kids for whatever is being taught. And the reason for that is the curriculum that is consistently changing and has been changing in a way that divorces the parent from even understanding what's going on. If you've seen the memes about Common Core math, that is not a joke. That is real. Nobody knows what the hell is going on except for the kids. Therefore, the kids end up having to explain this to the parents. The parents don't get it because they work at Starbucks from 4 to 9 and then go to their 9 to 5. And then, boom, I'm home in time to make grits and shrimp. That's a terrible joke. Nobody's going to get that. Maybe one person will. Damn. When we start talking about the home life, you are involving factors to which every single, as we've said before, the individual's experience is different. My problem is that as a black person, my experiences relate very heavily to people regardless of their background or their skin color, but based on where they live. We all share the same memes, we all got the same jokes, we all know what go on in the hood when it go on in the hood. That culture flies into schools. That culture becomes a school culture. So if it's cool to say, oh, I don't care, I'm gonna make my way one way or another, it becomes on us as teachers to reframe whatever they know into a positive light. The onus becomes on us, whether we want to or not, to become pseudo parents for them, because we are giving them the informational tools, at least at a basis level, for you to understand how to navigate being an adult in this world. You need to know math, so that way somebody doesn't shortchange you. You need to know science, so you need to understand what happens when you get a cut. I'm being facetious, but yeah. You need to know gym, so you can have a healthier lifestyle. You need to know certain things, and these classes teach you those things, and that's why we have the educational system set up from the ages of about 3, 4, 5, depends on where you are, to 18, and so forth and so on. College is an opt-in program. Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody has the mental acuity to pay attention in college. I was one of those people. I got through college gladly, but I had to take a semester off. I had to keep skipping semesters because I was wondering, why do I feel the innate pressure to graduate from here? Why is this work harder? Because I have more time. We didn't give that time or that understanding of the world to the children that we put inside of a Zoom class. If we had the ability to use Discord or something that they liked more, they would have frequented it more. They would have had instead of, we all have to learn how to use Zoom, the children could have became the teachers. Hey, we'll teach you how to use this, and we'll teach you we could have had fun with it. We could have had a different approach to education, but we took the same approach and tried to apply it down to this level here, and you're going to get the result you're going to get. People are going to fall behind. I'm tired. I don't want to stare at it. I've never stared at a screen for 8 hours. My eyes are used to a smart board 15 feet away in the classroom. I'm used to talking with my friend. We didn't provide any context for why the world was the way it was. We made it that way because we felt like if we uprooted everything, we won't know how to reach them. We won't know how to teach them. We didn't give ourselves any time to even think about a different way we could approach education. So when we have this conversation about parents, we have to have it right now in a not post, still going COVID era, where now the parents' lives have changed. I don't see my friends. I'm angry at home. I drink more. I drink with my students online. I can't be around the students' camera walking butt naked, so I'm not gonna be crossing into my room. We're changing little tiny aspects of every person's life and expecting them to be able to fall back right into the patterns of, hey, this is what you need to do to be more involved in your kid's life. We need to have incentives for that. There needs to be a system in place that gives parents a feeling like I'm going to this school board meeting and I'm going to get something out of it. I'm going to get, like, I can make a change. I hate to do it and put it all the way back to the whole voting circle, but, like, you disenfranchise people from the process itself. They don't care after 5 years about a parent-teacher conference or my kid brings home the report card. If it's bad, he getting cracked, and that's it. Like, if it's good, we're taking you out for ice cream at McDonald's. Like, the reward systems are different. The styles of life are different. And for us to try to equate all of what we like or all of what we live into as like, well, it could be this way, it could be that way. We skip over not only the home life in these little tiny details that affect the way people think and understand things, but then we look outside. What if, I want to have a sex ed class, but there's no Planned Parenthoods in the neighborhood? That kid got to go over to the next town. They don't have a car. I could teach you all I want. Like you said, I could scream. You want to be a good sax player? You want to be a good guitar player? Like they told me, you got to practice every day. But I go home. We can't afford a guitar. Personal responsibility when it comes to education has to be a united, and I hate it because I feel like that's your trademark and I don't want to steal it. But as Joe said, a concentrated and dedicated effort to assuage these small little tiny cracks so everyone can at least say, if my kid wants to take a music class, there's no money barrier blocking that. If my kid wants to learn about sex ed, at least they'll be able to put it in practice if something bad happens. Yeah, you know about Planned Parenthood, I'll take you there right now. But if you have a parent that doesn't believe in Planned Parenthood, it don't matter what I teach them. So that's where I agree with you. It's got to be up to the parents. But see what leaving it up to the parents does? It has to be a concerted effort. Yes, a village to raise a child, but we don't have a village. We've got cities, and there's highways in the middle of them. I don't know why. Infrastructure is terrible. I hate everyone. That's pretty much it.
Based. I think that was the best rant of 2021. I think we just saw right there. We just witnessed it just now.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I love that. I don't know. That just had me so riveted. That was amazing. I've seen you on other panels before, ParadigmShift. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that type of just perspective. That was amazing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's talk policy, huh?
I mean, I thought
I don't know how you follow that up.
I mean,
seriously, like how do you follow that up?
Like,
well, I mean, let's get into specifics.
That's it.
Really.
Like, yeah. I mean, like one thing is probably a mass expansion. Like if we're talking about the one thing about like abortion and stuff like that, like obviously an expansion of sexual education. And there's a lot of ways that you can go about that, but obviously it's very, very clear that physical education teachers are not properly equipped to do this. So we should probably also at the same time lower the certification barrier so that people in other professions can make it into the classroom at the levels that are age appropriate. I mean, is that something that anyone wants to tackle?
I mean, like, I agree with you there. I don't know what to say.
I agree that they should be age appropriate. I think, like, we should start off even as young as, like, kindergarten. You can start, when you're a kid, you teach people stranger danger. Like, you understand, like, hey, let's call body parts by their actual fucking names instead of making up these dumbass names like my cookie or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Yeah, let's call it a vagina and a penis. That's what it's called. Let's call it that. Like, let's teach these things.
I'm saying offset the burden of physical education teachers. Like, obviously, physical education teachers are the burden to teaching sexual education. And I'm arguing that this is probably something that you could have doctors to come into schools and to teach a class. Like, I don't see why a OBGYN couldn't teach a sexual education course.
So for me, my experience, at least in the school I was in, we had a health class, which was completely separate. We had a health teacher.
Yes.
And then we also had like when women, there was, I think it was freshman year of high school. They took all the women out of gym class for that week and sent them to the nurse's office. And the nurse taught us everything there is about a menstrual period. And this is what happens, this is how it's going to happen. But in my situation, and I don't understand why it came to only women having it and not the men as well. Men should be educated on this too. Y'all are going to experience it with your ladies or your woman, your sisters, your daughters. Like, yeah, like at some point in your life, you're going to experience this shit. So why not teach you it? Like, it doesn't have to be completely separated like that. And your high school nurse could teach you this shit. It doesn't have to just rely on that.
They can't, though.
Why not?
Because they would have to do it in a like the teacher certification in states still exists. So in order for a nurse to teach a class long term, like sexual education, they would need a teacher certification, which is why my argument, which didn't get addressed, was that we should probably lower the barrier of certification and alternative certification so that professionals like nurses could teach something like sex education.
Okay, wait, hold on. Wait, hold on. Just to recenter us in reality, okay?
Sure.
A PE teacher, anybody should be able to teach sex ed. Nothing that you learn in sex ed should require like a fucking RN or like a doctor.
You shouldn't have
You should have like a PE teacher should be able to have like a unit on sexual education. Right. These are things that everybody should know, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I wasn't saying like it should be, I'm not saying it should be exclusively taught in that capacity, but as an example, like if you don't have enough physical education teachers to teach that course, I think it's totally reasonable to like to have for a nurse to teach sexual education or even the district to be able to have that, to have it be an option.
Yeah, but like if you don't have the funding to have like a PE teacher, I seriously doubt you get the funding to bring in like external like medical professionals to teach classes.
Well,
you
can do it in like a 25% funding capacity or 50% funding capacity. So you can have it so that they only are responsible for teaching that course under specific parameters. That's what, I mean, the reason why I bring it up is because that's what my district does. So,
dude, PE teachers are like notoriously creepy. So I don't know.
I don't know if I would want my PE teacher to be
pick
that.
another subject. Science teachers.
Yeah, like in all honesty, that's where it should be taught. It's science.
Sex education
like,
is part of the PE certification in most states.
Yeah, but I think it should be in your science classes. It's what it is. It's science. It's about your body. It's about how your body functions. It's not.
Or I mean, like
everything is science, right?
We could just but like we could add a health class by itself, like to make sure people are educated on dietary health, lifestyle health, and like sex health. That way,
did y'all not have that?
Yeah,
I had that. Well, I had it as a single unit. That was like my education, where I was only taught like sex ed and like general like not physical, but like lifestyle health in like one unit for 2 weeks, and that was it. That was like
ours was like once or twice a week every week for the entire year. And it was about drugs. It was about, we wore drunk goggles to stimulate being drunk, and we taught you the effects of alcohol and drugs in your body and all that shit. We watched videos, we watched all that shit. But the only thing when it came to sex education was abstinence. There was no, hey, this is what a condom is. This is how you use a condom. Like, I understand we all laugh at that, but like in reality, like nobody ever taught you that. You just kind of figured it out. And rather than just, hey, let me just figure this out, why don't we have somebody be like, hey, this is the proper way to use this? Like, I just don't understand where this was lost in translation, like why we don't do this, because sex education is a big part of our life. Like all we do like is reproduce. So like why not do it properly and like cut back on STDs, cut back on STIs, cut back on teen pregnancies, cut back on everything that could occur. Like why? And
I can tell you why. Hey, finally something that I know. Because that's what you wanted. That's what people wanted. They wanted it to be stopped teaching in schools. They wanted it to be a responsibility of specifically the parent, because they felt like we would be teaching them some other things. And like, so we tried to like muscle it together. And then around, I think 2012, exactly, I could give you the date actually, March 14th, 2012, we just pretty much did away with all the extracurricular funding for a lot of districts across the country. Like we moved all the money into pushing more of a STEM technique, and that left everybody out to dry. We removed it completely because we felt like it was unnecessary. And when I say we, I mean the people who make the decisions. And we argued against it, we rallied against it, but it did nothing. And so now we're left in a society where like we don't teach that in a way that would be responsible and or leave a lasting imprint. Most kids just giggle in class, move on, and like, oh well, like, what am I going to give you as your final exam on health? Like, we got a multiple choice test on like what you've learned.
It's
and
a penis too.
Yeah,
Wait,
like
who made the decisions? Who made the decisions? Name names.
Nah, you're
Well,
good.
it's a bunch of
It's a bunch of people.
It could be your governor, it could be your state legislature, it could be your local school board, it could be your local school board in collaboration with your parent teachers association, which is in collaboration with the head of curriculum or the head of funding or the funding committees within the school board. You'd have to like, and again, like you could figure the stuff out, like you can ask directly. But not a lot of
the answer
people
isn't even, the answer. The key point here is that it's the will of the voters. Like when you say why did this happen, it's because that's what parents wanted. Parents didn't want their children to be taught sex at the school, and
but then they also didn't teach
homosexuality, and they're going to teach them how to have sex, and our kids are all going to be sex monsters and stuff like that. That's why it didn't happen. It wasn't just one elected official that did it. It was it wasn't an official elected to do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like this is what we're seeing with the field of study that I'm not going to waste time naming, is that like parents were galvanized and frustrated over a thing, which actually ties back into the C word conversation, where they don't want schools teaching students to hate themselves because they're white and a bunch of all these other things, and then instead of leaving it up to the school boards to decide, like, yeah, like we don't teach these things, but like. We just don't like that wasn't good enough for them. So they looked at a more legislative capacity. That's why we're seeing like the banning of these principles that again aren't taught in schools in a handful of states.
And you did ask, Buck, they didn't pretty much teach it when they had the money. The same reason why home ec and driver's ed like started falling off the curve sides. Even though we had it, like the curriculum restricted it. And especially in those curriculums, you can't bounce out of it to say, well, this book doesn't really describe it the way I would want it to. So like maybe we could take a deeper dive. Now you're fired. Rubber room instantly. Wouldn't even be a thought. And so any teacher put in that position, like you have to find teachers and move them from one subject to another, because nobody wanted to teach health. Nobody wanted to put themselves in that position where they slip up and make a mistake and boom, that's like, so the fear of that on top of all these committees and people who we can't name and people who you don't know existed until like 2 years ago, all collaborated and over time eroded it to a point where now we feel like it's missing and what can we do about it? But like, that's what we wanted, but we didn't see it. And when I say we, it's a general we, like the will of the voters, like that's what we wanted. And now we're mad at the effect of that, but that's what we wanted. And it's hard to explain how to get out of that because you also then have to undo and you see how the conversation goes in a circle. So to relate all the way back to where we started with the C word, I feel like if it's causing you a problem and it's starting a circle, then at what point do you care about the other circles? Because if it's about you, and not you, but like if it's about you, then at what point does it become about others? Because others collectively have had the same issue for the entire, and I hate when he said this, for the entirety of this country, and only now is it getting addressed. You can't flip people's brains. We could have this panel for 17 hours and talk about the deepest, darkest parts of this country. But like until people wake up one day and say, I'm not going to live like that anymore, that it doesn't matter about our discourse here. It matters that a certain group of people finally felt like they had something to complain about. And that's just not a world in which we can live sustainably, because if every year something new comes, I feel like I'm making a flu vaccine joke here. If every year something new comes up and we have to add a remedy to it, then why are we focusing on 2020 and like, well, yeah, the person that really didn't like me because I was black denied me an apartment and I never got the reason why, but I won't say the C word. Like, even if I said it, I can't put no power behind it. And I know how reductive that argument is, and I apologize for it. But like at the same time, I'm now not allowed to, as Gender Juice said earlier, I can't talk about saltines. Like I can't talk about export sodas. I can't talk about it. And you got that win. It took riots to get the Civil Rights Act passed. Like, we're not the same. I'm built different. I'm built different. And I feel like when we have this discourse, it's trying to equate two things that aren't equal inherently, because we know for a fact that it doesn't affect us as a general population in such a negative way that it could start to spurn something even worse. Now, if it does, then I would gladly eat up my words and be like, nah, I was wrong on that. We should have banned it a long time ago. My bad. I messed up. I could own that, but it's not happening. So what are we talking about?
When we have like conversations about like racial slurs, I don't think the conversation has to be like all slurs are the same badness. I don't think anybody's even argued that. No, like I think it's okay to say like this is
something like that earlier.
No,
Well, I mean, they might
just
argue-
said let's
they might
get rid of
argue
all
that-
of them. Stop being a dickhead.
They might
Yeah,
argue that
we
all of
would.
them are racial slurs, but I don't think anybody's saying that they're all the same. They're of the same level of badness, rather, right?
Doesn't
Yeah,
get
nobody
late
said
to
that.
this, but like the conversation was kind of like white people have a privileged position. It seems like pretty obvious in a lot of ways, and I think like them being the target and like equalizing like the playing field by maybe like
calling
not
some of them racial slurs.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I am saying like we do have this persistent gap between groups, and that privilege remains. And as long as it remains, there's going to be this tendency by some people, the people who are using the slurs, to try and like reach for whatever tool they can to like level the playing field. I kind of think that's
Yeah,
where it's
but like,
coming
so
from.
for people that would make that argument, can we use racial slurs against Jewish people in the United States? Because as a class, they're overrepresented in terms of wealth, they're overrepresented in terms of politics, they're overrepresented in terms of cultural representation. Like, and if not, why not?
Oh,
Somebody will
everybody
bring up
here.
the Holocaust, and then they'll be like, "Oh, well, they went through something, and they were oppressed at one time." And so the argument is that we weren't oppressed, so we can't be.
Yeah, but like, do you understand?
It's not equated the same thing.
And I'm not saying you're making this. So firstly, that's not
No.
true. To tell a white person that they don't have oppression in their history is assuming a lot of their ethnic background, which everybody does for some reason. It's okay to do it to white people, which is really cringe. But that's not necessarily true. And even to a black person, if they're not an African American, if you have like an immigrant from another area, they might not necessarily have slavery in their background. It really depends, right? But like largely, we can make these assumptions, and it seems like we're okay when we assume it all the way for white people. But the argument before was like, because at the end of the paradigm shift speech, you said like, okay, well, if it's starting to cause harm or if all these issues get fixed, it's okay. I would argue, and maybe some people disagree with me, but I would argue that Jewish people have done pretty well. You know, they have a country, they have really good representation in like the upper echelons of society in the United States. So why can't we use all of the arguments that were just used for why black people can call white people a cracker, and you know we can't do the other way around? Why couldn't we use that to Jewish people now? The answer really feels like the answer is just like, well, because that sounds bad, but then that makes the whole other prior argument bullshit. Or to be more on the nose, let's say in 50 years, let's say black people catch up in every way, and now they're even a little bit better than white people in terms of educational attainment and income and all that. Can white people call black people the N-word now because they're doing better than them?
If I can respond, a little bit earlier we did talk about this. We've acknowledged that some people that use the C word use it in a way that is pretty overtly racist. For them, they only see racism as systemic racism, in which white people are in the position of power, and so it's sort of justified to them. Which we've agreed that it's racism, yeah, and that's why it shouldn't be allowed. Although it's not to the same degree. It is racism nonetheless, and until we're at a society in which where racial ideas don't really exist, in which the color of your skin doesn't have associated negative or positive characteristics, and everybody is judged based on their merits, these words will have meaning. Although to differing degrees, they still have a negative and or positive meaning and shouldn't be used until we get to a place in which everybody's okay with just speaking however they would like. And
but the second thing on top of this, so we talk about classes of people all the time, okay? So white people, white individuals, okay, don't necessarily have white privilege. The white class has white privilege. I think that sometimes we have a really big problem where we start identifying individuals as classes, and individuals never perceive their existence as such. So a poor white person that lives in a rural community is not going to perceive himself as having white privilege. And in some cases, he might not even really have it. He might not be in a community where he's getting an advantage for being white. Or if he is, it's in a very tangential, historical historical, esoteric manner that he's never going to perceive. So to tell a person like that to become like a master of sociology and to understand the historical context in which his oppressive history sits over others, I think is a little bit short-sighted. Or I don't think it's possible. I don't think that most people could ever be expected to have that perspective, that you can take an individual and say, hey, listen, that guy can call you a racial slur because of like, here's 7 pages of reading you need to do to understand like why it's okay. I don't think that's a very realistic goal to have for
Yeah,
people.
no, I agree. This is why, like, again, this is a process that needs to happen over time, and nobody, like, at this point, it is good to just ban the word outright until people just stop using it, and just yeah.
I think more, maybe it's more grounded in reality. Like, I think, like, yeah, we should try our best to stop using slurs while simultaneously understanding that we ought to look into the context of why these slurs exist, how they manifest themselves in the context, and how they're used. Like, one of the reasons why I think the C word in part is a discourse is because there is a level of separation to the slur itself in terms of like, when somebody invokes the N-word, for instance, like it's very clear where that word was used, how it was used, and why it was used. But I would argue for a lot of white Americans, the C word kind of feels like this dated relic of the past that only comes up in these situations, unless apparently you're a Hasan watcher. But yeah, I think like we ought to not use these words, but try our best to explore the context as to why these slurs existed as they were. But that's not to say that like just because we understand it that it's okay to use it now because we know the context. That would be a ridiculous thing to even posit.
But then you understand how frustrating it is that on one end, right, like 2 white people that are fucking wannabe gangsters, listen to a lot of rap music, if they call themselves the N-word, like in a camaraderie fashion, they're not trying to be racist, they just do that, all of a sudden, there is no context, there is no excuse, it's horrible, it's racism, it's bad, that's the word, period. But then when it comes to people, like, in a really aggressive, pejorative manner, it's like, fuck you, you know, C word, C word, C word. Well, hold on, well, let's look at the context. That's insane. Right? Like there's no way that you can make both of these okay. That like 2 people using like the soft A N-word to each other who are white is really horrible regardless of context, but like aggressively calling a white person C-word, well, that's okay because of, 7 books of reading. Like there's no way that these could both be okay at the same time.
I feel like
there should be allowed.
Hold on, wait, because I'm trying to make sure I'm really like conscious of my language. Did I posit the idea that I believe that, or is we just saying that kind of generally?
It feels like that's like the natural extension of when you say things like we need to understand like the history of the words and why these are different. It feels like what you're saying is that in a perfect world, I should be accepting of somebody calling me a cracker, but I should understand that I can't, even use another slur like in a recreational manner.
Oh, no. Like, I guess like, I mean, my position on it is that words have utility in different contexts. So, but the thing that sucks about it, and I'm pretty sure you may have said this before, where the frustration is where there are white Americans who have the N-word in their cultural vernacular. And then like once you go outside of that community, there's this like you run into sort of like weird stuff where like you see a white person who has this word in their vernacular and then they use it as they normally would. And then like, yeah, I agree with you. There are people who are like, whoa, what? You can't say that. Whoa, crazy. And it's like, hang on. Like, it's totally possible for white Americans to have the N-word in their vernacular. I don't know why, especially left-leaning people die on that hill.
So to agree with both of you, so I don't die on this hill, I want to address Destiny because, you know what? I'm an honest person. I'm just gonna be honest here. Like, come on, I've watched you. Like, it's so cool for you to be here. It's so cool for me to be here. It's like, hey, like I said the same when Critically Thinking Veteran was here. I haven't met everybody yet, so the next time we do this, I'm gonna be like, oh, it's you guys. Sorry. Anyway, I feel like that part of what we're talking. I like that analogy. I really do about the Jewish people. I like that, but I feel like this is all talking from a point of not a perfect society, but one in which we could all agree on something and then it would be socially understood. Like the disconnect is that we could all end up on that agreement. Our viewers could end up on that agreement. how far does that culturally spread before it hits that roadblock? Like the same thing I used to talk about with my friend Jason. He's white, grew up literally down the block from me. We went to the same schools together. We went through elementary all the way to high school together. He never used the N-word though. And he explained it to me one time as, in theory, I could have the right because I grew up around y'all. Like, you know me, you know my status. The privilege thing never hooked in for me. I lived with y'all, so we ended up getting, arrested together type stuff or like random stuff. But he still never felt the need to add that into his vernacular. That is a social construct of his own that he thought of that he wasn't taught. So now I would need some type of social contract in which we can weigh these things differently until a point where socially we all agree these things are all bad when they intersect with one another. Like, if you, like the Hoff twins, thank you, Andrew. The Hoff twins, like in their neighborhood, that's their brother, that's their man's. Like, they say the word, like it don't bother them. Outside of that community, though, what is their acceptance? What is their validity? Do they get the card? Do they get the pass? If we start like basing things on people's environment as opposed to the social connectivity and contracts that we already have, where do we land on how can we agree? And I think you did say that. I'm sorry, I'm probably repeating what you just said. Where does that dichotomy exist together? And I don't think it can, because somebody's going to take it too far. And I feel like, given the license, you know who's the one who's going to take it too far. And I don't think it's the person saying the C word. I'm going to be honest with you. For right now, again, I will gladly swallow my words if in the next 3 months I start hearing about like hunter gangs looking for C words. Like, then, my bad. I said the wrong thing.
Yeah, I guess it's not necessarily a matter of like, is it too far or whatever? Because, like, I mean, we can argue. It's obviously a racial slur. And I listen, I like a lot of edgy humor, okay? But like, if you're not willing to admit as much, I think that like, you have to do so much groundwork to explain to somebody why this racial slur used as a pejorative, which is like the worst kind of racial slur, okay, is okay. And this other racial slur, even used in a non-pejorative manner, is always bad if certain people say it. Like, that's just an argument that it's untenable for 99.99% of people. I don't even believe that argument. I don't think it's true.
No,
we
I
treat
agree
like
with
some
you.
slurs in this country like we're like saying Voldemort's name, and then but for other slurs we can use as a pejorative, and then there's like a defense of it, and that's insane. That's just, it's not okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I hate to cut you off, but I think I can answer that for you, because I feel like a lot of us here, we could talk until our throats are raw, but at the same time, we want some answers. We want some moving forward points. The reason for that is the trauma of those words. The context of the N-word doesn't really matter unless it were to be, and I hate this idea too, the educational sense, but people still wince at the word. That would have to become something so socially acceptable that it would change where the direction of that word is going. And I feel like in this country, it's never going to. There are other countries that have the same sounding word, but it means something completely different. I wouldn't tell them to stop saying it, but they get hate. They get, you've seen the little TikToks, YouTube videos, people like, oh, I was talking in my native language and a bunch of people got mad at me. That's where I agree with you on, like, how is it fair for us to hold both of these things true all the time? But then for the inflection of it, if I say one word out loud, the people's reaction gives me that judgment. Like Buck said earlier, words got consequence.
It was Kate.
It was Kate. Sorry.
You're good.
Words have consequences. Your actions have consequences.
Yeah, I mean, we agree with that, but like, I agree with what you're saying, but the question is, when we talk about like these words cause a reaction, okay? Now you say trauma. I don't believe that's the case. I think that it's a socially reinforced thing. I think there is some trauma there, or potentially based on an individual's experience with it, but I think it's way more socially reinforced. And my evidence for that
and just to
would
be,
how
many, to be clear, not to cut you off, but you're talking about like socially reinforced trauma.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Because when you said, now I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but if you say the N-word, it seems like white people are more upset than black people are sometimes over it. And white people shouldn't have trauma related to the N-word, right? And I think that 90% of white people that are arguing about it online that are getting insane. And I'll even say,
Hold on,
as a
let's
white person-
be clear. Let's be
Yeah.
clear. White people on the left, like I have not found a white person on the right who has ever was like, oh, you can't say that. But again, maybe that exists. But
I don't know about that. I think the vast majority of
think
people on the
CTV
right
would
in the
disagree.
country, I think the vast majority of right-leaning people in the country, if they heard the N-word, they'd be like, whoa! Like, there's a reason why they started saying thug and shit, okay? They even conservatives,
It's
even a Nazi
uncommon.
from 4chan will tell you, bro, N-word, that's a bad look. You need to knock that shit off, bro. Like, even Nazis will say that to each other online,
like,
okay?
I don't exist in those holes, so I don't know.
I think for the most part, people, so like, I don't think that it's necessarily a traumatic thing. I think it's just, or if it is a trauma, I think it's one that's socially created or at least heavily socially reinforced. And to be clear, I'm not arguing to change that because no amount of anybody arguing online is going to change how we culturally view the N-word. I don't even give a fuck about the argument. I'm just saying that you have to understand from an outside perspective, you sound so unhinged when you're trying to say like, white people should be okay with having racial slurs levied at them as a pejorative, and then every other type of racial slurs policed so heavily, but this one is okay, or any against white people are okay. That's just like, it's such a recipe for disaster.
Do you think?
Well, I guess the best solution would be to ban both the words. Like nobody should be called a racial slur, and I feel like that's what
Yeah,
we
but
all
the
can
issue
agree
is
on.
the N-word has been used like in a like as almost as like a bro term, and that's the issue. And it's to the point that like we can't even like
It's been like
as a white
colloquialized.
yeah. And so like I was on a show before where I had two people of color who were throwing the word around, and I had brought up a story of how I had took a person of color to prom and he called me his N-word, like I was his bro, and then he was my bro and he was like, I'm yours, and I was like, all right, cool. And I brought up the story talking about it in context, and I had stated the word, which I guess was my fault for stating the word. It brought up a huge roar, and it was all by the white people on the show. You guys are right 100% that it's primarily white people who are throwing the argument about this. Two people of color on the show were laughing it off. They messaged me afterwards. They thought it was funny. They thought it was a great story, and in the context of where things came from. But these two people, the four other people on the show freaked out, had me removed from the show, whatever. I was like, all right, whatever. Why is that word thrown around as a bro term and allowed, but now we're banning this word in completeness, like you just said? Like, you literally can't even talk about your saltines. And I understand right now it's a hot word, so everyone's
My
like blowing
salted
it into
tops,
portions.
yeah.
We don't even know if that's really how this ban is going to be
That's not
enacted.
true,
but
right? You can say
yeah, we can't say that now, but it's just a hot take, so that's where it's going right now. But it's just, thing is, it's just completely different, and we're trying to like equate them as all racial slurs, and we're saying that it's you have to be an in-group to say them, and like it doesn't make sense in that aspect. Like, why are we throwing these words around if they have such deeper meaning behind them, and we're throwing them around as a bro term?
And just as a quick thing, even the in-group thing is really funny, because I remember in our Discord at one point in time, like when we talk about like trauma, right? In our Discord at one time, we were like, okay, should we ban the N-word completely? And it's like, well, we have black people on Discord. Shouldn't they be allowed to say it? So at one point we thought, okay, well, maybe you can say the N-word, but you have to send in like an ID card first to verify that you're black. So and like, you see how like ridiculous this guy's like, well, who the fuck even knows? Like, yeah, like it's actually like so crazy.
Like on Twitch, are they going to be like, oh, are you a person of color? Like, let's verify this before we allow you to say this word. Like, it doesn't make sense.
So, Kay, can I ask you a question then? Do you think that this might be a fun one. Do you think the N-word with an A and the N-word with an ER are the exact same word in terms of their application and usage?
No.
Okay. I feel like sometimes
we equate them as the same, which
not my words, but yeah, I would agree with that. And maybe there's a resistance that it's not possible for that to happen. That even when we invoke it with an A, that there's no way that we can separate it with an ER. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that.
I do. I feel like now we're talking about communities. And when we talk about communities, we really gotta and it's so funny he said, like, don't think about the past, like, let's pay attention to the future, but you really gotta like see how that word became a part of Black people's vernacular at first. You really gotta dig down deep and say to yourself, like, this is, like, as he said before, the socially reinforced trauma. How do we measure the severity of it? Because that word exists to try to water down that trauma. And I feel like only those people who would direct that word in a negative way towards me are trying to reinforce that trauma. Then again, when I say that word back at you, like, I really am only just picking the first, like, somebody said it earlier, there are all different terms for this, like now, and they've always existed, but like they're just coming up now. Like where is your reaction coming from? Is it coming from where you know it can get to, or is it coming from a place of you feel like it's equal? Because then we're talking about how we balance the effect of being a certain race in America and its history versus another race and its history. And when we start looking at the histories of everybody, we end up with very protected classes in those realms that have that ability. That is their privilege to say that word in their communities. And if it turns out that, you white and you grew up in a neighborhood, you could choose to say it or not, but it won't fly across the board. This one flies across the board, and the problem is, why are we letting it if we don't want any of the other things to fly across the board? And I'm saying it hasn't built up enough time or steam.
Yeah, so I've heard this argument, and I've given this argument before, but the more that I think about it, I think this is just a super ad hoc academic argument that just it's not reflective of the reality of how people think. So here's a couple examples, okay? So like Asian people and Hispanic people in the US can say the N-word, and it's actually chill. Nobody really generally stops and cares that much about it. But they don't have that same history of oppression. Africans, like actual people that live in Africa, Black Africans, can come to the United States, and they might not have any history of slavery, but they could say that word. Which also doesn't make sense because they don't have that shared history. If they're not an African American, they don't have that descendant of slaves. So I feel like this idea of there's a shared history, there's an oppression there. I feel like the way that it plays out in terms of how people actually engage with the language, I don't think that academic explanation maps on well to people's understanding of how these words work or where they come from. I think it's just a way more, I don't want to say shallowly constructed cultural phenomenon of it's basically just a word, and as long as you're not white, you can use it and it's chill. And then if you are white, you say any version of it, it's horrible. I think it's that simple. I don't think. It's not really.
Yeah, let me get there's a perceived hierarchy, and if white people are at the top in most people's minds, they're the people who are kind of fair game for the C slur or slurs in general. I talked about this earlier. We went through a progression where the N-word in Xbox back in the day was common. It sort of faded away and became more and more rare. And
it didn't fade away. It just
on public platforms, it definitely faded away. And I think, in my personal experience, I haven't heard it in so long. I'd be so shocked if I heard it.
You're white, so
yeah. I mean,
let's be honest here.
Okay, wait, hold on. We called each other the N-word back in games. It wasn't at only black people. People used to say that shit all the time in FPS. Yeah. Okay, it had nothing to do with there was a black person in the room, right?
Nah, because I'm going to use the T-Pain example here. The T-Pain example, that was 2021, and that was directed at him.
That might have been the T-Pain example 2021, but in 2013, if you hopped onto any CSGO server, or if you were in the early Xbox Live lobbies,
you would only have the voice.
There didn't need to be any black person in that fucking call. People would just calling everybody the N-word.
Yeah.
That was just
it could literally be all white, honestly.
I mean, it's still doing. But my point is, it still happens now. It's just that.
Do you think it's getting better? Both you.
What do you mean by better?
So
we wouldn't be able to quantify.
In general, racism, do you feel like racism is still moving in the right direction? And
that's a crazy question to ask. But as a black American, it manifests itself in different ways. Do I think that socially it's much easier for me to navigate as a black person in America? Absolutely. I don't have the threat of getting lynched in my backyard by a neighbor who is really upset that I looked at my daughter, weird. That reality is not in the modern zeitgeist of most, if not all, black Americans. However, there are still systemic issues that we have to deal with. I still have to deal with the fact that every time I turn on the news, there's a black boy or girl getting blasted in a city near where I live. I still have to live with the reality that so many of my black students are failing out of schools. So many of my black students are having children out of wedlock. These are all still systemic issues that exist within black communities that I'm involved in and other black communities in the United States. Racism isn't something that isn't exclusively interpersonally. Interpersonally, yes, absolutely. There's way less openly, overtly racial sentiment, but then there's still that coded stuff where you kind of have for black Americans, have to kind of navigate around. It's the reason why we won't have brain slug as an emote, for instance.
That's important.
And you asked
it's coded and it has to be coded. I would say that's an improvement over where we came from.
Wait, that is an improvement that it has to be coded?
It's become so rare. Well, yeah, it's become so rare. And I would say that effect of social media sites censoring it, I think it honestly shoves it out of people's mind to a huge extent, and like reinforcing it by repeating that word, or that word being common in your environment, say in like rural areas of the United States. If that's becoming less common in those areas, that's a good thing.
Like, we just had the situation of, God, what was that ADQ of? I mean, I don't know if I can say it here, but it's like Nika stole my bike. Like, that was a whole problem, and they were just like spamming the brain slug emote. That's like something in the zeitgeist for a lot of Black Americans on Twitch. Like,
and when we say things like having it go underground would be an improvement if, again, and I feel like I said this earlier, if we were coding these things to be eliminated over time from people wanting to have that feeling that is justified by that word. And I feel like this word does not have that same need of coding because it got banned because people were upset over it. Whereas even though it's less easily overt, it's now so heavily coded that you have to navigate the spaces in which you exist with other people in a completely different mindset than anyone else at the party.
This is an important question. So, like, do you think authority structures, we talk about systemic racism, like it used to be way more overt. Like, do you feel like Twitch is on your side in terms of like, if you had a legitimate grievance based on being someone being prejudiced towards you? I would ask you, like, do you feel like most social media sites, authority figures would like take your side and like be receptive? Like, because you have a power structure now that will seek to remedy your situation if you feel prejudiced against.
Also, I love you guys, but I have to sleep, okay? Stay safe, be careful. It's been fun.
Bye!
Good night. Stay
Nice
safe.
talking with you.
To answer that question, no. In my history of being on these platforms, I was one of the first YouTubers. I was one of the first YouTube partners. I tell you right now, nothing has changed. It's money. Money destroys the need for even paying attention to it, because if 17, like off the top of my head, I can name 8 Black creators over 5 million subs. If all 10 of them got together and said, like, we need to stop this, it wouldn't be answered. It wasn't answered in 2018. It wasn't answered in 2020. It wasn't answered in 2021. It wasn't answered in 2012. Let's use those years with specific dates so you can look them up and see the things that happened, because I feel like doing all that groundwork ain't going to really entertain people. Why they don't support it? And again, it's going to money. We can have this conversation forever, but like, they banned 2 streamers off their platform that make them a lot of money.
It's incentive.
Where's our leverage? We don't have any leverage here. And it's become to the point where this becomes Black people's discourse online. The gatekeeping of this to a point where our voices are ignored just for the sake of they're ignored. That's the way it is. Those structures are put in place to not care, because if they were going to care, they would have already done it. But this happened instantly. Why, if we have this conversation about it being equal or leftists not being able to understand, which I agree, the differences in how they react in their online spaces towards the world, then why is it these power structures will slam down immediately when I'm not saying you, but like when you get your feelings hurt? But when the hate raids were going on and we were all sitting there saying, let's boycott Twitch for a day, barely anybody did that. Our community, our society, the online one, Americans, and I'm making it America specific because I hope it's better in other countries. I want to go to another country. Like, we generally as a population do not give a shit. And when we try to like yell out like, yo, maybe you should care, y'all don't give a shit. But we give a shit about this so much that we're here talking about it. And that, like, it reinforces in my head, like, I might never be big enough to create a discoursal issue like this and bring something to light. I have to do it through a white guy. The white guy's feelings got to get hurt. Then people will listen. And if that's the case right then and there for this one situation, then the precedent being set is they'll only pay attention, at least for us, they'll only pay attention when that happens. So now
okay.
Yeah.
So look, let's go chronologically here. And like, we talk about like, is the N slur and the C slur comparable? No, of course not. There is like there's a hierarchy, like the CH slur for Chinese people, maybe. Like that's worse than the C word for white people. But like chronologically, probably the N word was the first to be like totally banned, and you're not allowed to do that on social media anymore. The C word, it's we're like the last thing here. So like we've set this precedent, like N word absolutely off limits. So it's the CH word. There's a ton of slurs that are worse than the C word for white people that have like gone by the wayside and become like more or less like totally untenable in like people's minds and on platforms. And like because we set that precedent and it's been years now and it's been instantiated and like it's been absorbed by people, we have this idea that slurs are bad. And when white people, when there's like Twitter posts that are sort of aiming hate at white people, and then there are slurs that count as a slur, however innocuous, and it's less grievous than the other slurs. But like we should like protect that precedent and like that standard and not have a double standard. And I think the outrage is just that like it's been years since we sort of banned slurs, and to like say like yes, slurs are banned, but this group is like still fair game. That's where people are coming from, and it's a dangerous precedent.
But this is why you can't like treat Twitter like it's the center point of society. Like, yeah, there are I'm just gonna set the floor here because it's getting alluded upon, and I was gonna say it. Look, like there are black people who say the C word towards white people. Is that racism? Yes. And this idea that it isn't racism is bullshit. And like I don't understand like why that floor continues not to be addressed. Black people can be racist to other black people. Black people can have internalized racism. Black people can be racist towards white people. And so often white Americans want to like think that like every time a black person says what I just said, it's bullshit, and then we're actually lying. And that's like fucking
Well,
dog
I think
shit.
the issue is that a lot of people on panels, I've talked about this several times in the past week or so, and a lot of people on panels have literally came out and said you can't be racist towards white people.
Yeah, and those white people are fucking stupid, and you probably shouldn't listen to them. And if they say that take, they don't have any understanding of how institutional racism and social racism exists. And maybe, just maybe, another thing might be happening. You're not interpreting what they're trying to say to you. That might also be another thing that's happening. So like,
No, that was their exact wording sometimes.
it might be another thing that's also happening.
There's no interpretation on that one.
I believe it's very hard for people to articulate their points properly, and we set and investigate their points properly, that might have been the perspective with a little bit of archaeology. And again, I would have to see the situation in context to see that. But by and large, I believe that people don't have the proper tools to talk about racism online. And then what happens is you get these ideas that white people can't be racist towards other white people, or that black people can't be racist towards other black people. Like that's the floor. We understand how social racism works. But for some reason, like there's always like this idea that we like forget that. And it gets a little frustrating because then we end up with discourse around the C word where it's like, yeah, we understand that slurs are a little complicated, and that's sure, like we probably shouldn't use them. But when I say something along the lines of, hey, let's like explore how these words work and manifest itself in a way of nuance that has nothing to do with like the social interaction of it, because we understand what the floor is, don't use slurs. And then it kind of gets into like, well, actually, what's the extent of it? It's like, I don't know, man.
This is important. On that term racist, we see this everywhere, is like racist is prejudice plus power. Most people colloquially and like before this new definition.
That's one aspect of racism. I'm just gonna stop you there. That's one aspect of racism.
Can I just give you my definition?
As an aspect of interpreting racism in a particular system.
Hold on. And at that point, I'm going to stop everybody, right? Because apparently, as soon as Geek decided he was going to fucking bench CTV, his moderation became zilch, right? So now we're taking this shit over, right? So we're going into closing statements. We're going to start off with Mr. Geek, who has now joined the panel. It's amazing. Mr. Geek, what's your closing statement?
I don't know. Slurs are base.
Fantastic. Wow. We listened to all that discourse and we got nothing, right? So next we're going to throw it over to Joe Lewis. Go ahead.
Don't use slurs. Black people can be racist towards white people. White people can be racist towards white people. Like, stop the cap. Get off the internet. Scratch your asshole. And if it's really itchy, try to wash it. I don't know what to tell you.
Wow, I think washing should have been a part of the first step. But Dr. Red Pill, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish up what I was saying at the end. People say racist, and if they pervert that definition or like use a very new definition, just say racially prejudiced, and that'll like accomplish what you probably meant. I appreciate you guys having me, and yeah, don't say slurs. Appreciate that those two terms are not equal, and like there is like a lot of like that gap in that. Yeah, it's important to keep in mind where it's coming from, and some of it's definitely legitimate.
Outstanding. Paradigm shift.
I love you guys. There wasn't that much yelling over each other. You know my brother Joe. I'm gonna have his back one way or another. I agree with everything he says because I have to. It's by law, you know. We got to stick for each other. And I'm kidding. What I want to end with is I believe that when we analyze and talk about these things, we do it with the short attention span of knowing, because we're all smart. For the sake of, we know what we're talking about. For some degree, somewhere, we know what we're talking about. And when we have these discussions, I feel like I always think back to, at the end of the day, what is the end result, or what is the overall effect of the thing you're trying to say, the message you're trying to get across? Do I agree that all slurs are bad? I think nobody's going to disagree with that. Of course I agree with that. But I feel like now we're getting to a point where everyone's getting to say something. And when people come from a colonized place, when people come from a place of understanding their environment played more of a factor or role in their life than others, when you try to hop on that and say, well, what about me? It's like, well, you could just ignore me and I wouldn't, like, my existence wouldn't affect, my non-existence wouldn't affect you. You could eliminate the N-word from your language and it wouldn't put you anywhere better, because that would mean that people who use the word, and we're talking about the soft A here, people who use the word would be less. There's overarching power structures around language. And when we have to understand that, we are going to get to a point where we're checking, wow, is that a way, could we say black people have privilege? Yeah, I'm getting there. Black people have privilege? Maybe. But see, the conversation keeps leading on and on. We need to have a baseline understanding of what we're saying, what we're trying to achieve, and if that is something worth tackling. Because if it isn't, and if it is, let's do that.
Outstanding. We're going to throw it up to Ginger Juice. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. I started to have shitty Canadian lag spikes. So it seems like almost everybody on the panel has been agreeing with me to one point or to another. It seems like we all understand. The people that say that the C word isn't racist, they usually conflate systemic racism and actual racism and think that everything is the way that the system is, a systemic problem in which white people have overwhelming amount of social power. It's not. It is a slur. It is racism. And we shouldn't use racial slurs because, honestly, remember, if you're going to insult somebody, make it on the content of their character and not their skin. And yeah, I feel like if there was a winner in all of this, it was Nobody, and I would like to introduce myself as Nobody as well. Yeah.
All right, so Nobody was just speaking. I don't know who the hell he was, but he was Nobody, right? So let's see who we got left. KayBuckOph, take it away, hon.
I'll be easy, quick and easy for you. Stop being dicks.
There you go.
No.
She said, stop being dicks. There it is. Monty, you jumped in here.
Yeah, that's right. And I said nothing. So that's great. What's my great insight into this? Objectively, slurs are not bad if not said hatefully. Unfortunately, some slurs, you'll say them and there'll be consequences to that exacted by other people. And you're going to have to deal with that. But it seems to me that if we want to curb hate speech, but you say syllables together and they're not hateful, then I guess your intentions are not bad. But that's not how it's going to work out, really. I mean, Hasan said the C word, right, and it was hateful. All right, and I think that's what people took exception to. I think that's really what it comes down to. Is it hateful or not? Is really what matters. And then there's the political loading of the other word, but all the other that's kind of a multiplier because of other stuff, you know.
Outstanding.
There's my insight. Montreal player.
Outstanding. I just did shout outs for everybody in the chat. Now